Chapter 501 Trial complete. The location is still the beach. It has been more than a month since the last time I came here. Every day after that, only researchers will wear cold-proof clothing and diligently monitor every movement under the ice. It is worth mentioning that most of these researchers have voluntarily transformed into undead, and the purpose of wearing cold-proof clothing is to prevent the joints from freezing and affecting their activities. Because if it is the body of an ordinary person, then they will face all kinds of time-consuming things such as eating, sleeping, etc. For these scientific madmen who are obsessed with research, these things are a complete waste of time. For more than a month, a monitoring station has been built on the coast. Thick steel pipes extend from the bottom of the monitoring station, and the other end is thrown into the sea between the coast and the ice. Because the island turtle and Jones complained that the ice in that area made it uneasy, unable to sleep, and there was a danger of frostbite after a long time. However, it is unrealistic to eliminate the ice around the sarcophagus of Halu, so Loya had to take action and melt the part of the ice that was close to the shell of the island tortoise, avoiding the direct contact between the ice and the island tortoise. In this way, although it is still a bit cold, it is completely within the acceptable range for the island turtle. And because there is an area that can reach the bottom of the sea, it also provides convenience for researchers to observe the movement of the box at close range. When Loya and the others came here, these steel pipes kept vibrating, making bursts of rhythmic humming. In the monitoring station, the ripples on the screen vibrated, rising and falling like a heartbeat. It can be confirmed that the vibration came from the Halu stone box, Lord Geisa. Seeing a few of them come over, someone immediately handed the inspection report to Geisa. Geisa carefully compared the above data, then nodded and handed it to Loya solemnly. Lord Loya. I don't understand. Loya stopped Guy's movement and said, just say, can you bring him up now? Of course. Guy's eyes flashed with excitement. He has always been disgusted with Vegapunk, but now he is carrying out an experiment that Vegapunk has not completed, transfer the devil fruit into the human body. If he completes this, at least in terms of experimental direction and process, he is no worse than Vegapunk. That's good, remember our agreement, Guy. Loya responded lightly, then paced towards the edge of the coast. When the staff around saw Loya's actions, they abandoned their work and ran to the distance. Loya's actions are not serious, what if the action is bigger? The undead are not afraid of death, but they definitely don't want to try the feeling of being locked in ice and unable to move. Standing on the shore, Loya squatted down and put his right hand into the seawater. Then he didn't see any movement. He raised his hand upwards and pulled out ice Jinchuriki column. Each ice Jinchuriki column is connected to his fingertips, spreading and coiling like a thick rope, and the other end is submerged in the sea. As Loya continued to pull, soon, there was a dull crashing sound under the ice. It was the sound of the seafloor sarcophagus being dragged and smashed into the ice. Geisa and the others turned black and hurriedly ran into the distance. Sure enough, they had just left the place when a huge ice ball was pulled out from the seabed by Loya, and the rope, made of 5 ice Jinchuriki column was wrapped around the outside of the ice ball to ensure that it would not be broken in the impact. Blues. Boom. The ice puck drew a parabola in the air, and then fell heavily to the ground. If they continued to stay in place, they would probably hit them. Ignoring the resentful eyes of Robin and the others, Loya came to the hockey puck and stretched out his fingers to lightly touch the puck. Click. A crack appeared on the shell of the ice puck, and then spread rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the puck was covered with dense cracks. At this time, there was another shock. Boom. Crash. The shattered outer layer of ice collapsed immediately, shooting like bullets everywhere, leaving bottomless potholes on the beach. Ulysses stood in front of the others, flicking these lethal shards of ice with his fingers lightly. Not even a drop of Uhiti was spilled on the other hand during the process. Looking at the familiar sea-floor sarcophagus, Ulysses said, "It seems the experiment was successful. It should be a success. And the effect is beyond our expectations." Loya nodded as well, because the weight of the box was different. He was very familiar with every bit of his body's strength, and when he scraped off the ice that had just dropped, the weight of the Halu sarcophagus was much heavier than before. And now there are only grams of rock doll in it, so where did the added weight come from? Quick, remove the screws and seals. Ratchet instructed his subordinates, who climbed up and down to dismantle the sea-floor stone seal used to seal it. Almost at the moment when it was just opened, a yellow-brown dust storm surged out, smashing the outside. The lid was pushed aside heavily. There is no trace of K. Rockdale in the coffin, and the sandstorm is him. Suffocating me, you don't know how annoying it is. An hour later, the location is the hall on the first floor of the castle. Rockdale kept talking about his hardships while pulling the fresh pieces of meat into his mouth. There is no light, no sound, and the undead do not need to sleep, so it is impossible to pass the time by this method. It was completely enclosed in the sealed space of the seafloor sarcophagus for more than a month. If a weak-willed guy came here, I am afraid that he would be a waste when he was released. But K. Rockdale persevered and successfully integrated the power of the rustling fruit. Except for becoming a little more talkative, there was no trace of sequelae. I don't know how long it took, maybe half a month or a week. K. Rockdale said, I couldn't control myself at all. I even tried to give up the experiment and wanted to open the door and run away. Quote. As a result, you found out that the outside has been frozen by me. It's unrealistic to run away. Loya could imagine what kind of torture K. Rockdale went through, and he smiled a little strangely at this moment. Yeah, that's absolutely right, that's it. K. Rockdale chewed the raw meat dripping blood in his mouth, and then he could speak clearly, showing how miserable he was. It stands to reason that there are only a few sea-floor stones outside. The screws I built, with the strength I had after turning into an undead, should be a little loose no matter what. The result was completely different from what I imagined. No matter how hard I tried, those things would be as long as they were long. The same as above, not moving at all. Then I thought of you, Lord Loya, and finally I had to give up this idea. The ice cubes of Loya are indeed not as hard as the seafloor stone, but they are used to wrap the coffin and prevent the devil from escaping from the outside. The strength of these ice cubes can be imagined. With the strength of K. Rockdale, it is impossible for him to break through the double defense of Halu stone and ice cubes. This is not a question of 1 + 1, but 1 raised to the nth power. Hearing this, the rest of the people laughed lightly. Even if they vented wildly, it would be of no avail. How desperate should that situation be? But joking aside, the most important question now is the experimental results. Geisa has sorted out the information and handed it over to Loya. Because Loya is a layman, Geisa tried to simplify the language as much as possible, summarizing it in a way that laymen can understand. Looking at the heavy data listed above, Roha rolled his eyes and licked his dry lips. That is to say, those with the undead fruit ability, won't they be restrained by seawater and sea-floor stones? Chapter 502 Army of the Dead. As we all know, seawater and sea tower stone, this is the eternal nemesis of devil fruit ability. Even the strongest Whitebeard in the world could only drown if he fell into the sea. He was handcuffed by the Halu stone lock, and the terrible shock of his body that destroyed the world could not be used. But what appears in front of Loya now is an unrestrained method. Hearing Loya's words, Gaisa's eyes were full of excitement, and he nodded seriously, yes. Whether it is Halu stone or seawater, the pyrob broin horny particles in them do not directly invalidate the ability of the fruit power user, it is to suppress the ability to use it. Although it will also have a restraining effect on the things created by the fruit ability, it cannot directly make it disappear. Quote. Before I didn't understand why, because everyone is like this, so I thought it was the effect of pyrob broin keratin particles. But now I understand. Gaisa said excitedly, the use of devil fruit requires the cooperation of the body, and the body of a devil fruit person who touches the pyrob broin horny particles will be counteracted by the pyrob broin horny particles to cancel all activities. Trying to keep walking normally when the building stone is locked is already beyond ordinary people's perseverance. But this is not enough. This is the reason why this phenomenon of restraint has been created. For now, no one can meet the minimum requirements in a restricted state. But the undead are different. It is not the heart and blood that drives them, but the pure soul force. The body is just a container and a tool for the undead, which can be disassembled and assembled at will. Pyrrhoc-broin keratin particles can also be restrained. The exertion of their physical strength cannot limit the drive from the soul. So as long as the soul strength does not weaken, then this restraint effect does not exist at all. That is to say, seeing people working so hard, Loya answered with interest. That is to say, whether it is seawater or halu stone, as long as the undead can withstand the uncontrolled weakness of the body, they can exert the same power of devil fruit. This is really a surprise. Loya never thought that the undead could be exempted from the restraint of the Pyrrhoc-broin horny particles on the ability person, but the fact that K-Roctal turned into yellow sand in the seafloor sarcophagus tells him that the undead devil fruit ability person is really not will be restrained. Except for some release-type abilities that cannot be used in water, correspondingly, even if they wear Shanghai Tower stones, their abilities will not be weakened in the slightest. Because for the undead, the body is something that needs to be driven by itself. Whether it is weak or not has absolutely nothing to do with the soul of the subject. You really gave me a surprise, guys. Loya nodded in satisfaction. This sentence made Geisa even more excited. Not only did he save his life, but now it seems that Loya is very satisfied. There is also a little more confidence in officially defecting to Loya's banner, and it doesn't feel as far away as it seems. Why did he go to Punk Hassad? Isn't it because he is a wanted criminal with a bounty of 300 million? Apart from that dead zone, Geisa couldn't think of a safe place. But it's all right now, with the great god Loya in charge, what else can he worry about? Then the experiment continues, and strive to build an army of undead capable people as soon as possible. The number can be small, but it must be elite, understand? Ulysses. Loya greeted Ulysses immediately. He bowed slightly and listened to the order. Loya pointed to Ulysses and said to Guy, next, he will be responsible for your personal safety. If you need anything in the experiment, you can ask him, understand? It's insurance, whether it's for Loya or Geisa. The latter is used to this kind of thing, and naturally has no opinion on it. And when he was experimenting with undead soldiers, having such a great commander by his side would help a lot. Don't worry, Master. Ulysses smiled slightly, indicating that he would complete Loya's orders. Behind the Navy headquarters, in the family town, in a hut facing the sea. From that day on, Zepha moved out of the small courtyard arranged for him in the fortress and came to this humble hut, isolating all contact with the outside world. Only through Yin, who appeared on the street every once in a while, could the crane know about Zepha's latest move. There is no way to say this kind of thing. I just hope that the situation can be stabilized as soon as possible, and then try to get rid of Edward Wabel as soon as possible. It can also be regarded as the last answer to Zepha as an old comrade in arms. Aokiji strolled down the street, and you could see the Navy signs hanging all over the street. In the past, the logo was a reassurance for the people living here, but now, the logo is gradually losing the credibility it deserves. It's all Loya's fault. As Loya's teacher, Aokiji arbitrarily placed all the blame on Loya's head. But this can only be complaining at will. To be able to let go of himself is that Loya looks at the original teacher-student relationship, and wants to do something to Loya. It is undoubtedly a brain show. While walking, a man suddenly rushed out of the tavern on the side of the street, and nervously pulled Qingzi and ran into the corner of the street. Qingzi knew him, otherwise he would not let him pull him. This is the owner of this tavern. When he was a recruit, he sneaked out to find him to buy wine and drink. Is something wrong, Daddy Will? The old man Caldwell looked around, made sure there was no one around, then he was relieved, and then looked at Aokiji seriously. Aokiji, tell me the truth, Marshal Sengoku and the others are really not dead. Again this question. Aokiji has been asked dozens of times in the past few days. As one of the few people who also participated in the battle that day, Crane, as the deputy marshal, was busy with official business all day, so this group of people could only turn their attention to Aokiji. However, have you even started to worry about the people who are close to the headquarters? This situation is really not what Aokiji wants to see, because since the people here are so uneasy, then I can imagine how serious the situation is on the Four Seas and the Great Route. In this regard, Qingzi rubbed his hair and said helplessly, Father Will, Marshall and the others are really not dead, they just need a little time to thaw. Huh. Will, who got the answer, breathed a sigh of relief and felt a lot of peace of mind. Aokiji won't lie about such a big event, it's just a little time. How long is it? The world conscription has kicked off vigorously. Powerhouses and hermits from all sides have appeared one after another, hoping to take this opportunity to skip the accumulation of military merit and use their strength to create a good way out for themselves. If the time is short, then this doesn't have to happen at all. About a year and a half. Aokiji said with his face folded, suddenly blinked his eyes, lowered his head and said to Will, You can't talk about this, otherwise there will be trouble. I know, of course I understand. Will frowned as he listened to this time. It's no wonder that Sengoku and the others didn't really die and they didn't announce the time. Such a long time was enough to make the already turbid sea create new waves. Once the news is leaked, one can imagine how the pirates will riot during this period of time without them to deter the sea. It would be better to close the news directly now, so that the pirates are confused and jealous of each other. Then I'll take a step first. Be sure to remember, don't leak it out. Aokiji put one hand in his pants kabuto and waved goodbye to Will. Chapter 503 Warmed Heart. Malenford is not large, and after the headquarters fortress and various military facilities occupy most of the area, the space left is very general. Similarly, the area of this town is not very large. A few minutes later, Aokiji came to a house by the sea and knocked on the door. Teacher Zephyr, are you inside? No one answered, as if no one was inside. Just as Aokiji was about to knock on the door again, the door suddenly opened inward. Aokiji's hand lost its target and stayed less than 10 centimeters above Ain's head. General Qingzi, are you here to find Teacher Zephyr? Withdrawing his hand, Qingzi looked at Ai Yin, who was dressed as a cook in front of him, and nodded. Miss, he asked me to bring something to Teacher Zephyr, can I go in? This. Ain looked back in embarrassment. On the balcony of the hut, Zephyr, who was sitting with his back to the door, only showed his head and shoulders. Hearing the conversation between the two, Zephyr was silent for a moment, and nodded slightly. Please come in. Ain continued to work in the kitchen, because the two of them were discussing things that she could not be involved in. The table is a very simple table, and the teacup is also the most common teacup. Looking around, except for the necessary furniture and decorations arranged to make Zephyr feel better, there is no valuable thing to see, and it is unpretentious. It is hard to imagine that this is the residence of Zephyr, a former admiral of the Navy and a former chief instructor of the recruit battalion, Black Wrist, Zephyr. As an all-powerful figure on the sea in those days, such a situation in his later years makes people feel inexplicably desolate. And unlike the material conditions, the hut is filled with lingering loneliness. Even if the fireplace burns through yuhi, it can't dispel the cold that penetrates deep into the soul. When things are done, should you find more people to accompany Teacher Zephyr? Aokiji thought so, took a sip from the teacup. The entrance is bitter and sandy, not a high-end product. Opposite him, Zephyr was holding the envelope and reading it carefully, word by word. What this data records is important, but more importantly, the emotions the data owner wants to express through it. The heart that had been cold for many days was warming up at this moment, and a rare gentle smile appeared on Zephyr's face. What exactly is written on it? Aokiji is very curious about this. After putting away the envelope, Zephyr put it in his pocket. Suddenly his face sank, and he looked at Qingzi with a bad look. The things have been delivered, why are you staying here? The Navy is now that you can roam everywhere. Time. Hi. Aokiji almost spit out a sip of tea, raised his hand to express his surrender, and then got up to say goodbye to Zephyr. Then I'll go back first. If there is anything you need to inform Yin, just tell me. Go away. I am alive and well, and I don't need anything. Shrugging helplessly, Qingzi pushed open the door and walked out with Ian's voice. Seeing Qingzi leave, Yin couldn't help but feel a little worried. Dinner has been prepared for 3 people, and now that Qingzi is gone, how will the 2 of them finish eating? Bring me his share. I'm in a good mood today, and my appetite is good. Zephyr sat at the dining table, waiting for delicious food. Well, Zephyr's mood is as important as everything. But his current body can't stand stimulation, and his appetite must be strictly controlled. Ain put half of the food in his bowl, and then handed the rest to Zephyr. Don't eat too much at night, so much is enough. Sengoku never showed up, and the pirates who smelled an unusual scent also acted. Among the news brought by the news bird, the news of pirates causing chaos appeared more and more frequently. This era of great pirates looks a little more chaotic than before, but it always gives people a more stable feeling. This feeling comes from the ice dragon that is entrenched in the New World, and also from the world conscription that the Navy is holding vigorously. This was something that the world government took the lead in, and the news spread all over the world on the evening of the day the order was confirmed. Then, the whole world boils. Not all aspiring young people yearn for the freedom of the sea. With different personal experiences and different worlds, they will naturally form different dreams. There are only a lot more people who dream of joining the Navy, punishing evil and promoting good, and implementing the name of justice, than those who dream of becoming pirates. But the reality is that there are several times more pirates than the Navy. There are various reasons for this, from origin to strength, from age to temperament, all of which are obstacles to becoming a Navy. And the most important point is that the Navy cannot afford such huge military expenditures. Yes, no money. Joining an organization, obeying the arrangement of your superiors, and fighting for your life on the sea, just relying on love to generate electricity is not enough. You must have the protection you should have, and you must get the benefits you should get. And there is no such high threshold to become a pirate. There is a ship. You can have no ship. You don't even need any signs or subordinates. As long as you claim to be a pirate, then congratulations, you have successfully joined pirates this ranks. Moreover, even if they joined the Navy, it would be difficult for all living beings to stand out. Who doesn't want to be successful? Who doesn't want to be at the top? The instinct of all living creatures is to make themselves better. In addition, the world peace and the protection of the people are all born under this premise. The Navy is a place that depends on military merit, strength and character. Even if you pass the strict screening and join in, whether you can stand out has become a serious question before everyone. Combined with those various constraints, not many people dream of joining the Navy and put it into action. But now it's all right, an opportunity to step up to the sky has appeared. Regardless of whether Sengoku and others are dead or not, it is an established fact that the Navy urgently needs to expand its combat power. As long as you pass the background check and personality test, then where you can sit depends on your personal strength. Even the position of general does not seem so out of reach. As a result, the world shook, and countless blood fighters embarked on the road to the nearest naval branch with their own expectations. Of course, so many people will not be screened by the Navy headquarters. The commanders of each branch are the assessors of the first screening. Batch after batch of assessors stepped into the various branches to accept the test, and then either walked out dejected, or held their heads high and showed off their scores. It can be said that a large part of the strength of the Navy was restrained by the worldwide conscription, which made more pirates see the opportunity and took advantage of the opportunity to do a few things. However, it didn't take long for them to be happy, and a bolt from the blue struck, making all pirates feel extremely cold. Because after the first stage of screening was completed, the Navy announced the test basis for entering the headquarters to accept the final judgment. That is the record. As a Navy, except for those special talents, the rest are serious combatants. And what are the fighters to do? Who are their opponents? Of course, the pirates in the vast sea. The test results can't represent everything. How much power can you really exert in the face of pirates? This is an important indicator for judging strength. Take a day off, be honest. I really can't do it anymore. I vomited out. I still want to tell everyone before struggling to lie down on the bed. I wrote a chapter of 2,215 words today. I was going to continue the code at night, but I didn't expect to drink too much. There is really no way to do it with one chapter. It is immoral to put only one chapter, so I will make up for it tomorrow. Oh yes, I just changed the line and turned on the computer before I saw this chapter and said, sorry it was my food before, the N power of 1 is indeed still 1. Ha ha ha, I really can't finish drinking and coding, the speed is there, but there are many mistakes. Chapter 504 The Crane and the Ambitioner. It is worth mentioning that, I thought that the high score obtained in the branch test was a good thing, but these guys were immediately stunned in the face of this second test. Because the higher the score, the higher their passing score in this test. It directly dispelled the plan of opportunists who wanted to score points by catching those little pirates. What kind of strength do you have, then what kind of enemy you go to catch, and the final record is selected. The Navy is not like the Kiba Tower, but a combat unit with a very high mortality rate. If you want to get an official position, you will eat and wait to die. Such a guy does not deserve to be a Navy. Faced with doubts, Crane held a speech and made the above remarks. As a result, a vigorous pirate search operation began. Not only the Navy was catching pirates, but almost all the people of the world were involved in this arresting operation that swept the world. The General Staff Officer of the entire Army and the think tank in the Navy's Iron Triangle really lives up to its reputation. After reading the newspaper in his hand, Loya handed it to the people around him and asked them to take turns watching. Crane is also worthy of her name. The phrase, "I hope to become an admiral of the Navy," directly ignited the ambitions of all participants. The flames were so strong that they ignored the fact that there was no possibility of a fourth general in the Navy. A Navy with 4 general seats, will the world government allow that to happen? It is impossible to think. Or are they pinning their hopes on Akainu and Kizaru, hoping that they hadn't been rescued? Who can tell? Anyway, in front of those guys now, it's just a false name of a general. Even if the military merit is staggering, it is impossible to directly be promoted to general. Fujitora and Green Bull in the original book can soar to the sky. In addition to their excellent strength, there is also the prerequisite that the position of general is really vacated, and the Onpol candidate is not strong enough, so that the 2 lucky ones can complete it. An unprecedented feat. However, apart from the generals, the real seats of the general school are also clearly listed, and everyone can see them and have the opportunity to touch them. Crane just used a bad check, plus a bunch of innocuous positions, and mobilized the whole world. It's also really scary. Of course, this is absolutely not allowed in normal times, because it does not meet the rules. To be able to advance things to the current situation, there is naturally the acquiescence of the world government behind it. They also don't want the times to run wild, because they still have their own clothes that haven't been washed clean. Seeing that the Chinese New Year is approaching, and an emergency meeting is about to be held, be calm if you can. After reading the report, it was Simon who felt the most. He grew up listening to Madame He's legends since he was a child, and had a deep yearning for that resourcefulness. In addition, as a member of the Golden Fox family known for his resourcefulness, he is full of respect for him. If he were to be replaced by the current Crane, even if his subordinates sincerely obeyed, and even if the world government cooperated wholeheartedly, Simon would not be able to guarantee that things would be done so neatly. There was just one problem, and he couldn't figure out how he would solve it. You said, will someone really go to the position of the general? How is that possible? The former Rear Admiral Drake directly refuted this question. In addition to military merit, in addition to strength, the most important thing is the firm position. Position is not something that can be identified by just trying to figure it out. It takes time to accumulate, and trust accumulated from a tiny hair. For example, Lord Loya. Drake pointed to the confused Loya and said, "If you didn't have the trusting relationship you established in the elite camp, just look at what he is doing now. Will you still follow him sincerely?" It's not just Simon who is thinking about this problem, the rest of the fellows in the elite camp are the same. Then they shook their heads in unison. Absolutely, no, possible. Hey, give me face. Ignoring Loya's complaint, Simon said worriedly, "Doesn't that mean that Ms. Crane deceived everyone, and if they find out the truth of the matter, they should be dissatisfied with the Navy? At that time, most people will make trouble, and the Navy is now. Can the power be suppressed? This is a fact. Human beings are not stupid donkeys. Carrots hanging in front of them will only move forward stupidly. When they found out that the fresh carrot would never be eaten in their mouths, just dismantling the pole above their heads was the way humans should deal with it. In fact, the people who can't see the truth are only a few. And this problem, it's not a problem at all." Robin suddenly interrupted, and everyone focused on her, ready to hear what she had to say. "How many days have there been wizards in the Navy's past, but there are always only 3 generals. There is no vacancy, no matter how strong or loyal. Now the Navy has not announced the death of Akainu and Kisamu, then the 3 generals are complete, and no one can change that fact. They're well aware of that. And through this attitude, the smart people among them have seen that the 3 Sengoku did not really die. They are working so hard now, it is more a statement, laying a foundation for future opportunities. After all, if the 3 generals can be defeated once, there must be a second time." Aludo shivered and rubbed the goosebumps on his arms. Smart people are scary. And those guys who try to be opportunistic and ambitious have no chance to make trouble. Speaking of this, Robin smiled disdainfully. This kind of expression rarely appeared on her face, which was enough to prove that at the moment how much she looks down on the guy who will come out and jump in the future. "I understand the front, why is the back?" This time around, Simon didn't turn around, and asked in a daze. At this time, Loya coughed twice and calmly pointed at himself. "You. What does it have to do with you?" Simon looked at Loya inexplicably, and thought about his relationship and purpose, but he couldn't find any clues. Unless the world needs stability, so the Navy is needed, Loya will help the Navy to tide over the difficulties. However, is there any necessary connection between the two? No. Seeing that Simon still didn't react, Loya sighed in frustration and had to point out the topic, because of power. Power. With a blink of an eye, Simon suddenly recalled the names of the 3 current generals in the outside world. Monster. You finally figured it out. Robin laughed, and Simon was embarrassed. It's not scary to be ambitious, it's not scary to take advantage of loopholes, the most scary thing is ignorance. I don't know how high the sky is, I don't know what is, and I want to get in on things that I shouldn't touch. What's the use of this kind of ambition? It's nothing more than a prop to kill chickens and warn monkeys. This is what Loya once said in the sky. Robin is learning and using it at the moment, and there is nothing wrong with it. No matter what happens in this world, it relies on fists. Blackbeard's ambition is one of the best, but he honestly pretends to be a grandson before he has enough strength. Doesn't he have ambition? It is because he has it that he knows fear and what is real power. Those guys who are immersed in their own world and think that everything can be solved by their heads, it's fine if they don't jump out. Once they jump out, they will be lightly broken and bloodied. They will be carried into the pond in the small courtyard of the headquarters as flower fertilizer. There is also a big drop. Just like what Loya once said, in the world of One Piece, if the truth makes sense, what else would violence do? Chapter 505 The New Lieutenant General. Fujitora, Green Bull. Just when the 4 seas in the paradise became lively because of the world conscription, the new world in the second half of the Great Route was not affected much. Because here, the interference of the Navy and world government is negligible, With just one G5 branch, how stupid can you be if you want to do things under the eyes of the 4th Emperor and Luoya? Moreover, the base chief of the G5 branch disappeared a few months ago, and there is no news until now, and it can be determined that something has happened. The new base chief faced the group of gangsters who were bigger than the navy. It took a lot of effort to make them obey the new chief's management and stabilize the surrounding situation, and he didn't have the spare time to participate in this big conscription. So, a very strange scene happened. Residents on the islands of the New World read all the news about who and what was arrested by what big pirates, and what kind of good seedlings the navy found this time. Then they turned around and saw that nothing happened in their hometown. As if they lived in two different worlds. The days are still the same as 1010, nothing has changed. But if you really want to find a little change, it is not without, that is the sea area adjacent to the Chambord Islands in the New World, where the people have started a mighty migration. He would rather go deep into the New World, or submit an application to cross the Yuhi soil continent, rather than stay in the sea area controlled by Loya. That shocking record made everyone know how terrifying this person is. Unlike the 4 emperors who only knew their prestige and rarely revealed their existence, the ice area that traverses the Great Route can be seen and touched. Right. In order to beware of Loya, the Navy also issued related tasks to protect the migration of the people and allow them to settle down again. Therefore, this new year, many people have to spend it in migration. This situation makes Loya laugh or cry, because in this way, the surrounding Turtle Island has really become a no man's land. If you want to supply and buy some things, you have to travel a long way to find a place where people live. This has added a lot of trouble for everyone to plan the New Year's festival, and it can be regarded as a surprise. It was in such a situation that the last day of 1519 came quietly. In the cold winter, a rare sunny day adds a lot of festive atmosphere to this new year. In the relatively flat position in the front half of Turtle Island, several tall stands were built, and soldiers climbed up one by one to compete against each other. As undead, they have lost most of the joy of living, and even the lifespan is calculated in 100 years, which is also the lifespan that appears due to the inevitable decay of the body over time. In this state of no desire, if you don't find something to do, boredom and emptiness will only drive a large group of people who are not determined. As a result, Simon suggested to engage in such an arena-like activity to liven up the atmosphere. They will show their strengths in front of the two great commanders, Rockdal and Ulysses, and then they will decide their place in the Legion for a year-long period next year. It can be considered to find a little fun in the boring days for the dead. Due to the inconvenience of transportation and the cultural independence of each island, One Piece World has not formed a grand festival that the whole world celebrates together. Only this New Year's festival can be regarded as the most grand festival in the world. Whether it is the Navy or the pirates, whether it is the silenced army or the world government, at the end of the year, they are more or less lazy. The world conscription also came to an end for a rare day, and everyone was ready to have a good New Year. On the top floor of the mechanical castle, Loya held a piece of the latest information in his hand, and an inexplicable smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It's time to come, the new Lieutenant General of the Navy's headquarters, Fujitora. Green Bull. This was the news announced by the Navy on the day of the emergency meeting, and it was announced with the arrival of the New Year's Day. The world conscription has been going on for such a long time, and the Navy has already discovered many talents, but these two, even among the large number of masters who have appeared enthusiastically, are among the best. Due to Loya's departure, the position of the 17th Lieutenant General was vacated. In addition, Karp was seriously injured. After waking up, he took over the position of the chief instructor of the recruit battalion. Individual. As it turned out, these two extremely powerful players appeared in this world conscription, and they were directly promoted to the position of Lieutenant General. Loya was a little emotional about this, how powerful the inertia of history is, and Fujitora smiled, such a powerful loose person, which was already in his plan to win over, and he was confident to convince Fujitora to join him. But I didn't expect that the Navy, with an advanced conscription, was one step ahead and pulled the two into their own camp. Robin's reaction made Robin a little puzzled. She looked at the two ugly guys in the photo and tilted her head slightly. Are these too strong? Lord Loya. It can make today's Loya express his emotions, so who are these two sacred? And looking at that photo, one of them is still blind. For this question, Loya smiled and said casually, is it very strong? Well, it's just two generals. Cough, cough, cough. Simon choked the air pipe with a sip of water, lying on the table and coughing. What did he hear just now? Two generals. Ignoring Simon's reaction, Loya continued to explain. If it wasn't for the lack of vacancies for the three generals, I wouldn't be surprised if the two of them were directly promoted to generals, but it would be a bit underpowered to only let them be lieutenant generals now. Wait until Sengoku and the others come back. The Navy in the future will only be stronger than it is now, so don't take it lightly. Actually, is it so powerful? Robin sucked in a breath of cold air. The sea is indeed capable of producing many people, and two guys who have never heard of it before have the strength of a general. The two of them plus the three of Sengoku who will return soon, that is to say, the Navy will have the combat power of 6 generals. You must know that even Loya will be suppressed by their joint efforts without the use of mysterious magic. It is conceivable what a terrible monster the future Navy will become. Coupled with the hidden powerhouses that Loya discovered in the Holy Land, Mary Joa during the tea session, sure enough, the current Turtle Island is still a lot worse. Perhaps a single strength is still their strongest, because they have a very heavy trump card like Loya, but in general, they do not have the ability to directly challenge the world. So next year's focus is still on the New World. Compared with this group of monsters, the 4 emperors will be better to deal with. After briefly summarizing the future, Loya waved his hand and said that he did not want to talk more. The tea party revealed too many things, and he didn't want to touch the muddy water when the situation was unknown. Hearing this sentence, Simon's eyes flashed with excitement, remembering what Loya was going to do. He nodded seriously. Understood, Lord Loya. Chapter 506 Analu Who is Doing Things. 3 more please subscribe. After the Chinese New Year, the world began to hustle and bustle again. The first thing the Antonio family did when they settled in the power center was to start an inventory of naval scum and rectify the order of the sea. In the past, due to the lack of reserve forces, even if it knew that there were many rats and ants in each branch, the Navy could not show the determination to rectify it. However, with the emergence of the world conscription, countless strong men were born enthusiastically. Compared with the positions that will be vacated, there are more people. As a result, similar to the Navy scum from Lieutenant Colonel Mouse in Kokoja village, this time it was blood mold. Groups of members of the CP organization in white suits held various materials and secretly issued cleaning orders one by one to the newly joined Navy soldiers. When the world government and the Navy cooperate wholeheartedly, the world will discover what absolute power is. No matter how deep you hide, no matter how big the backstage is behind you, as long as you do something against justice, the same ending awaits you. And through these purged positions, the Navy, which had become less united due to the influx of new recruits, has become stable again. Those who take advantage and taste the sweetness, of course, must strive to maintain the majesty of the Navy. Not just for the sea, but for themselves. Even if the idiots like Loya and others guessed jumped out, it also became a prop to kill chickens and warn monkeys. In just a few short months, the world has been truly wonderful. The era of the great pirate has continued to the present, and the world has finally moved on another unknown road. But anyway, one thing is undeniable. That is, the power of pirates has been cut by more than 30% in the continuous turmoil in these months. Even in the East China Sea, which is said to be the weakest sea, there are almost no traces of pirates. Even the bigger crimes were wiped out and everything was peaceful. However, everyone with discerning eyes can see that this seemingly peaceful situation is just like the tranquility before the storm. On March 15, 1520 in the Haiyuan calendar, the world government issued a circular announcing the list of the new Chihuahai. After months of running in and invitations, this one of the three great forces of the Great Root, whose funny significance is greater than practical significance, finally has a bit of the majesty of the past. The personnel in the past have not changed. Before they made a big mistake, the world government had no reason to trouble them. Even if the world knew that Jones was Loya's subordinate, it didn't have anything to do with it. Action. However, among the new recruits, there is something intriguing. One of them is the self-proclaimed Whitebeard II, the legendary son of Whitebeard, Edward Wable. When this introduction was placed on the front page of the news, an idea could not help but pop into everyone's head. That is the monster Whitebeard. Does it have a son? I really want to see what Whitebeard himself thinks about this. And this person's bounty is as high as 480 million. Even if it is not the son of Whitebeard, he is definitely a monster with terrible strength. In addition to his record, it makes everyone understand that he can become the new Chihuahua, not because of the title of Whitebeard II. But it is this person's record, but there is such a thing. 7 years ago, Edward Wable met Zephyr, who was the chief instructor of the Navy's recruit battalion at the time. All the students on the training ship led by Zephyr were slaughtered, and even Zephyr himself was cut off by him. Smart people all know that this record, which seems to be playing in the face of the Navy, is actually impossible to hide. Even if the Navy does not announce it, the opponents, Miss Ba Jin, who calls himself his mother, will not tolerate his son's record being hidden. Compared with being ridiculed when it was revealed in the future, the direct announcement now proves the confidence of the Navy. However, this object is somewhat intriguing. Because that Zephyr is the teacher of Ice Dragon, Loya among the monsters in the New World. When Loya was a recruit in the Navy, he studied under Zephyr. It can be said that there is now Loya, and Zephyr's role in it is very important. The domineering and 6 styles he taught have benefited Loya a lot to this day. Why didn't Mariah? Those ordinary people didn't know the secret. At this point, you can pause for a while, because the second new appointment, Chihuahua, is also inextricably related to Loya. In Punk Hazard, the entire island was smashed with one blow, and the top ability of the natural system of thunder and lightning, Thor, Anilu, became one of the new Chihuahua. Anilu, who landed with Ulysses' undead army, faced the poisonous gas monster, Death Realm, released by Guy, and annihilated it with a mighty thunder. Split into 2, it can be said that even if he is not Loya's subordinate, he has various connections with Loya. First, Edward Wable created a gap, and then arranged for Anilu to win over the relationship. No one could see what the world government was trying to do at the moment. In fact, not to mention the onlookers, when the news was announced, even Loya was a little confused. Nilu has become Chihuahua, still dragging Weibo together. Well, not to mention the conflict between Anilu and Weber. Why did his subordinates become Chihuahua, and he was the last to know about the boss? Actually, it's because of your relationship. After a moment of embarrassment, Simon gave the answer. Because of me. What's wrong with me? Loya's eyes widened, feeling that he was inexplicably carrying a black pot on his back. Didn't you say a long time ago that there is no need for the Chihuahua system to exist at all, and is it inevitable to eliminate this system? Simon explained. Then it happened that Anilu needed to do something, in the spirit of not taking nothing for nothing. He had the mentality of making things bigger by the way, so he readily agreed. So, what the hell is he trying to do? Loya rolled the eyes of the dead fish and sucked the juice. He did say that he wanted to eliminate the Chihuahua system, and he indeed held a contemptuous attitude towards Chihuahua. But no matter how you go about it, there must be rules to follow. Anilu has now become the new Chihuahua. Is it still for his sake? Just that afro-headed fruit madman, not loyal, he never expected Aniluo to be so sensible. However, the words of Shichibukai. Could it be that? Seeing Loya's eyes, he knew that he already had some guesses. Simon took out a blueprint and put it on the table, which Ratchet gave him. Yes, for that right to legal plunder. Looking at the new ark that was going to be made of gold on the blueprint, Loya already fully understood Anilu's plan. He couldn't help but sighed helplessly. Hey, let him go. Gilded Tezzolo is not so easy to solve. When the two of them fight, it's hard to say who wins and who loses. And the other side is as black and white as Doflamingo. If you want to grab his gold, the enemy you will face is not just the Golden Emperor. Quote. Unexpectedly, the words of his aggressive generals on the empty island left such a deep impression in Analu's heart, and Loya was quite speechless about it. But this is not a bad thing. At least Analu has a goal to strive for, and it can be considered to be out of the state of salted fish. Well, of course, it's still the same sentence. Whether the arc proverbs made of gold can fly or not, I'll leave it to expose Akatsuki later. Not intending to intervene too much, Loya waved Simon back. Just after Simon left, the phone bug on the desktop rang. The person who called was Jones, who had been sent by Loya to look for Lord Lantern for several months. Mosamoxi, have you found pure gold? The sea area where the other party lives can be roughly determined, but I still need a little time. Jones woke up and listened to the voices of all things. He couldn't let him and Roger discover the message the dead wanted to express, but it gave him the ability to communicate with animals. Ability. It is not very difficult to find the huge lanternfish with his ability. But Lord Loya, I met someone just now. I think it's better to give you some things in person. Oh. Chapter 507 Big Mom's Invitation, and the Return of Sengoku. The carrier pigeon with white body and black wings soared into the sky and quickly disappeared above the top of the clouds. If someone looks carefully, they will find a green light in the eyes of the carrier pigeon. After a long journey, ordinary homing pigeons need to rest for a long time before they can send messages again, and these dead homing pigeons, as long as their wings are not broken, they can run tirelessly in every corner of the sea. Loya can have the current intelligence network, and more than 50% of the credit should be attributed to them. Watching the carrier pigeon go away, Jones clapped the dust on his hands and stood up on the back of a sea king. Around this sea king, there are parts floating on the sea that look more like cakes than decks. Ow! With a dull low roar, this ox-like crocodile-like sea king stepped on the seawater and continued to take Jones to the depths of the sea. According to the plot of the original work, Mishia Olga, a little girl who lived for 200 years, escaped from the fish belly 2 years later. Luffy and the others were able to meet Lantern because of the light of pure gold. The only way to find pure gold now is Jones' ability to communicate with animals. After all, it is a terrifying beast with 3 islands in its stomach, and wherever it swims, it is a terrible nightmare for local creatures. A few days later, Turtle Island. Loya took out a piece of paper from the letterbox at the feet of the carrier pigeon, and then handed the carrier pigeon to the soldiers waiting by the side. When the surrounding soldiers dispersed, he opened the cylindrical letter and stretched it to read. After a while, after reading the above content, Loya pouted in disdain. Tisk tisk, Aunt seems to be in a hurry, she dares to invite me to the tea party. Jones met a messenger from the 4 emperors, Big Mom, pirate group on the sea. They handed Jones an invitation to a tea party and wanted him to pass it on to Loya. Because Turtle Island is a biological relationship, it is impossible to navigate with ordinary pointers. Fortunately, they met Jones, otherwise they would have to worry about what terrible punishment they would receive if they failed to complete the task. However, Charlotte Lingling has the courage to invite herself, the worst dragon, who had just fought against the Navy at the risk of the world. But thinking about it the other way around is also right. I am now entrenched in the new world, except for the power turf. The rest is only stronger than the 4 emperors, and there is already a message of 5 emperors circulating in the outside world. But in the past, the 4 emperors were all pirates, not to mention that they all dreamed of becoming pirate kings, but they could find some things in common. However, Loya is different. Shanks has already told Whitebeard that Loya is not a pirate, not a navy, not a silence army, not a world government or any other force. This made ordinary people feel a little hesitant to judge his 5 emperors, wondering whether he should be directly included in the pirate camp like the 4 emperors. But it is undeniable that today's Loya is already an important giant in the world, and his position is enough to change the pattern of the entire world. It seems to be seeing this. Charlotte Lingling, one of the 4 emperors, invited herself to the tea party she was going to hold. Not surprisingly, she should use her usual strategy for marriage. To become one piece, her ambition is the strongest and simplest. In order to achieve this goal, all the sons, daughters and even herself can be used as props for marriage. The world's greed, or perhaps because of fear, has always been satisfied in the face of her invitation, and indirectly contributed to the birth of the largest kingdom in the New World, the world. If the two cooperated, it would be mutually beneficial for both him and Aunt. But if you invite me, I'll come, so how shameless am I? Loya smiled disdainfully. Compared with the tea party he had attended, Charlotte Lingling's tea party was ridiculously low-end. Even if these are not mentioned, she is a mere 4 emperor who wants to invite herself to move and let herself go to the depths of the new world without taking any pains. Therefore, Loya was not only not angry, but felt that he did a good job when Jones directly killed the 2 Charlotte family messengers who were outspoken and charitable. The strong must naturally have the dignity of the strong. I smile at you because I am polite. You dare to provoke me because of this, that is, you don't know how to live or die. If the other party dares to say anything after receiving the news of the death of the 2 dragon sons, Loya doesn't mind directly killing Cake Island and smashing the kingdom into the sea. After going through a battle with the high-ranking navy, he already has enough understanding of his current power. To deal with a Charlotte Lingling, he has a perfect grasp. Because this matter is very important, in order to avoid the news being eavesdropped by various strange abilities on the sea, Jones used the most primitive carrier pigeons to transmit the message. But don't be so troublesome now, because Loya's attitude is very firm. He took out the phone worm generously and dialed Jones' number. You did a good job, come back when you find pure gold. He didn't say what he would do in the future, but a very good was enough to show his attitude. Jones licked his dry lips, and a bloodthirsty smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. I heard that there are many exotic animals in the world, I don't know the taste. How will it be? You will have a chance. After a brief chat, Loya hung up the phone. Turning around and walking into the castle, just after passing the corner, Loya wrapped his arms around him and hugged Robin, who was rushing towards him, in his arms, and then asked lightly. What happened? Seeing that the person coming was Loya, Robin breathed a sigh of relief and handed him the newspaper in his hand. Sengoku and the others are back, and at the same time they announced some orders against you. Hey, no peace. Loya shook his head with a wry smile and took the newspaper from Robin's hand. This is the first public appearance of Sengoku and Kisurugi Akainu after successfully lifting the freeze. In addition to standing up to stabilize the impetuous military spirit after the conscription, it can also play a leading role. The Sengoku in the photo is obviously a little older than before, as are Akainu and Kisaragi, who are in their prime with a little more white hair on their heads. Loya's freezing is not just ice, it is also continuously extracting their vitality. With the existence of an unscientific scientist like Vegapunk, although this kind of extraction will not kill them, it will still cost a lot. In addition to the old face, the color of the skin on several people is also different. It takes too long to take off the ice that is clinging to the body. It happens that the 3 of them are strong-willed and tough, so the last layer of ice was torn off together with the skin. Obvious traces of healing still remained on several people, and even if the chest was raised, the scars after serious injuries could not be erased. Sengoku delivered a speech at the headquarters square a few days ago, focusing on Loya's threat to the stability of the sea, calling on all forces to unite to fight against him. Of course, Sengoku didn't mention Loya's tendency to hate Tianlong and the world government. After all, the bosses above are still connected with Loya, and no one can tell what they think in their hearts. If they say it, the world government will not deal with Loya, but will first cleanse Sengoku. This is what is called politics, what is called a power struggle. Chapter 508 The meaning behind the fish dead and the net broken. In this speech, Sengoku announced that the Navy will focus on the New World next, and will secretly build several naval bases in the New World to show his determination to get rid of Loa and the four emperors. In the past, it was not that they never thought of reaching out to the New World, but every time the Navy built a subbase with great fanfare, they were all attacked by pirates from all sides. Often, the location of a base has just been determined, and it is breached by pirates. One can imagine how risky Sengoku's plan would be, but he did it anyway. The newly added generals, Fujitora and Midori, have a fatal impact on the battle situation. It is precisely because of this conscription that Sengoku has the confidence to release his rhetoric. Then, a series of guidelines on restricting the development of Turtle Island, from trade to exchanges, were announced together with the orders issued by the world government. It can be said that if anyone contacts Loya and the others in the future, they will become the target of the Navy's first strike. Various military factories began to manufacture weapons and ammunition on a large scale, and the slaughtering orders were even more ready to go. The behemoth of the Navy headquarters is ready for a full-scale war. It was because they knew in advance how the Navy would react after Sengoku returned, so people with discernment could see that the current stability was nothing but the tranquility before the storm. At the end of the report, Sengoku was not angry, staring at the phone bug with a pair of tiger eyes. Loya, the Navy trained you. Now, the Navy will destroy you too. After reading Sengoku's entire impassioned speech, Loya stayed there in a daze, not knowing what to think. Robin didn't speak to disturb him. She made coffee silently and brought it to Loya in the corridor. The aroma of coffee woke up Loya. He blinked and took the coffee. Thanks. Are you worried that the Navy will come back desperately? Robin asked slowly. Loya doesn't want to destroy the Navy. Everyone on Turtle Island is very clear about this. His enemies have always been pirates and dragons, and a Navy to maintain the stability of the sea has never been in the plan. But if the Navy really puts aside all scruples and hits the door, it is impossible to capture it, then Loya must destroy the opponent. However, this is not good news for Loya and this sea. For Robin's question, Loya frowned and thought carefully for a moment. No, they won't do it. The reason is the same as they didn't dare to go to war with the four emperors before, destroying the balance of the sea, which is quite unfavorable for the rule of the world government. Before I have absolute certainty, I am very safe. Then what are you worried about? Others may not be able to detect Loya's hidden emotions, but how can Robin, who has a delicate heart, not see it? After all, in the first half of her life, she was all looking at people's faces and trying to figure out people's hearts. Didn't you find out? They're forcing me to make a decision. Huh. Robin snorted lightly and looked at Loya blankly. You idiots, I'm so convinced. At the same time, Simon sat in the living room and looked up at the sky speechlessly. On the sofa in front of him, there are not only a series of elite battalion companions such as Tony and Aldo, but also the two great commanders Ulysses and K. Rochdale. Sengoku's statement is about the safety of Turtle Island, and no one can ignore it. Everyone is very concerned about the profound meaning contained in this. For Simon's evaluation just now, a group of people looked at each other blankly, and then there was a crisp sound of swords being drawn. Gollum. The Sasori sting in Rochdale's hand was only 1 centimeter away from his neck. Even if he couldn't see it, Simon could feel the sharp breath punching a hole in his neck, and the pierced skin was painful. Not far away, Minnie's foot, wearing a special leather shoe, tapped lightly and rhythmically on the floor, and every stroke seemed to hit Simon's heart. Knowing that he had committed public anger, Simon raised his hand in cold sweat and smiled awkwardly. Misunderstanding, it's all misunderstanding. I'm a fool, I'm a fool. Stop talking nonsense, speak quickly. As the yellow sand rolled, K. Rochdale retracted the extended sand arm and exhaled a smoke ring with a gloomy expression. Cough cough. The situation is like this. The Navy can't disappear. That's the only reason I didn't kill Sengoku and others directly. Sitting in the chair, Loya frowned. You know the specific reasons, so I won't repeat it. Robin nodded in understanding. Then, Loya continued, Now Sengoku has released a clear speech to tell the world, mainly to tell me that he is ready to die. However, whether he can win or not, I believe he has had a head-to-head confrontation. There is no confidence at all. Quote. But. Loya sighed. If I didn't act, he would really call the door until the last man in the navy died in battle. Why did he do this? Just to maintain the justice in his heart. Robin looked at the newspaper and looked at the old man with an old face. He knew he would be defeated, he knew he would be defeated, he knew he would be wiped out. Why would he do such a thing? Moreover, once the navy is destroyed, who should the stability of the four seas and the great shipping route be entrusted to? Without the navy that suppresses the sea, what kind of chaos would the world be like? Why would the world government agree to such an arrangement? Justice. Loya sneered. Are you still thinking about this kind of thing until now? In Robin's stunned eyes, Loya spread out his hand, and the ice crystals wrapped in ice blue magic flew up and down in his palm. It was such a faint light, but Robin couldn't turn his eyes away. He felt that all the light around him was attracted by the faint blue, and there was only this mass of power that represented ice and death in the world. Justice, or kindness, mission, is just a term given to it by human beings. The justice that Sengoku insists on is nothing but a self-deceiving emotion. After a pause, Loya continued. In fact, he himself understands this. That's why he has a speech now. Only strength is immortal, and only strength is eternal, justice. Whether it is the unity from people's hearts, the target of a force, or the violence of burning, killing and looting, it's all a kind of power. What I have now is strength, the strongest violence. With the magic in his palms scattered, Loya re-examined the newspaper on the desktop, and what they have is strength, the strongest will. Quote. The two forces are not comparable, but in reality, they can influence each other's direction. Speaking of this, Loya suddenly felt a loss of interest. Even though he has become the strongest in the world, he is still limited by the rules and regulations of reality. He even said that these shackles were put on by himself. Sengoku found this out, so he gave that speech. Hey, that's all. If they want it, then do it. With a wave of his hand, Loya was not ready to continue talking. He took a sip of the cold coffee, turned around and walked to his bedroom. Tell Simon, plan ahead, and let him give me a definite action within 3 days. Process. Understood, Lord Loya. Luo Bing thought he understood something, but he always felt like he was looking at flowers in a fog. She nodded earnestly, packed the coffee cup on the table, and walked out silently. Chapter 509 Charlotte Lingling's Plan. 3 more subscriptions. New World, 4 Emperor Seas, Cake Island. Silence and depression shrouded this seemingly prosperous land. The sky was densely covered with dark clouds, and lightning flashes flashed through it from time to time, followed by a heavy drum-like muffled sound. Thunder and torrential rain poured down, the sea was gusty, and the waves rolled up to 100 meters high, smashing the fragile reefs. In the central castle of Cake Island, the lights are bright, the warm pink and yuhi decorate the entire hall, and the air is always filled with a refreshing sweetness, which makes people involuntarily relax. But at this moment, this warmth did not make anyone relax, and everyone in the hall lowered their heads, daring not to disturb the huge figure on the throne in front of them. That's Charlotte Lingling, the true ruler of all nations, the only woman among the 4 emperors of the New World. She was wearing a big pink yuhi dress, with thick mouth yuhi and light purple eyeshadow. Just sitting there, it gave people a kind of breathless depression. At this moment, Charlotte Lingling was holding a piece of cake in one hand and a ball of dessert in the other, chewing with a big mouthful of food. The kind of food and aura that made her look very kind, but at this moment she was like a gluttonous devil, wanton, exuding a violent aura. Charlotte Lingling has a severe eczema, which occurs from time to time, without warning and unpredictable. And once the attack occurs, she will fall into a frenzy, smashing around and destroying everywhere in a frenzy. There was no way to get her back to her senses other than to get her to eat the food she wanted or beat her. And when he got sick, he didn't recognize his 6 relatives, and even killed his own son, so he couldn't listen to anyone's words. The hole in the outer layer of this building is the trace left by her eczema attack just now. Fortunately for everyone, the sweets she wanted to eat this time happened to be stocked in the castle. After paying some inconsequential price, she succeeded in preventing her from going mad. However, the current calm is only temporary. Because after she woke up, Baron Ball had told her about the deaths of Charlotte Joscarpani and Charlotte Mascarpone. Now she was eating frantically, but her eyes were full of bloodshot eyes, and a frantic tyranny spread out, rolling up the wind and rain. "Mom." Pokemus spoke in a low voice, but after speaking, he didn't know how to continue. Killing a member of the Charlotte family is a serious crime that Charlotte Lingling can't tolerate. She can slaughter the city and destroy the country just for a sweet tooth, and her attitude towards the murderer can be imagined. However, the target is the Ice Dragon, who almost won the battle against the high-ranking navy. One can imagine the difficulty in getting revenge. It is even said that Pokemus himself does not believe that the Big Mom pirates have the confidence to fight against each other. Just like the ordinary pirate group, Turtle Island is also centered on the leader of Loa, and the rest are there to assist the captain. But among those cadres who don't show much publicity, none of them are weak. Take the rock doll who defeated Drought, Jack and Flamingo as an example. How many people among my own people can achieve that level? I am afraid that except for those who are the strongest, no one has that kind of confidence. And even they can't make a guarantee. Coupled with the more than a year of lurking after Guy's multiple injuries, the various records of the undead army, and countless facts tell them that today's Turtle Island is a top-level combat force that is enough to suppress their core, and the cadres are also enough to suppress them all. Scary monster. If you want to go to war with this kind of force, do you really have to bear the consequences? Charlotte Lingling also understands this, so she is eating now, suppressing her inner anger. Sending out the invitation letter is just one of her thoughts. If Loya doesn't come, she can't destroy the other party as usual. But if Loya comes, the two sides will have the opportunity to cooperate. Becoming the Pirate King, she will have an advantage. She has already made plans that Loya will not attend the tea party and make herself the laughingstock of the other four emperors. But she never thought that the other party would kill her two children directly, without even a single reason. Perhaps it was because she was used to doing whatever she wanted in Wangguo. She didn't feel that there was any problem with her children's attitude towards outsiders, and this time she specifically asked the two not to be so domineering, which can be said to be sincere. But even so, Loya still killed them. Charlotte Lingling didn't know that the guy who killed his pair of children was Jones, and Loya didn't do anything at all, but she understood that because of this, there was no room for relaxation between the two, and it became a complete hostility. Power. Either swallow this breath and pretend nothing happened. Either go to war with each other and fight to the death. To be able to reach the level of the four emperors, Charlotte Lingling is not a guy who fears others. Even in the face of Roja, who has vaguely surpassed Whitebeard and became the strongest in the world, it is not enough to make her fear. Suddenly, she stopped what she was doing and looked at Baron Dandan with his head bowed in front of her. Baron Dandan, who is the Ice Dragon Loya's family. The Big Mom pirate group is a pirate group established with family as the core and blood as the bond. So they all understand how much the word family can affect a person. If Loya's family can be found and threatened, the current situation is nothing at all. So far we haven't found out the origin of Ice Dragon Loya, and we don't know anything about his family. Baron Eggy was sweating coldly, and the teacup on his head trembled slightly. Of course, this answer could not satisfy Charlotte Lingling. She narrowed her eyes slightly, and her vicious aura swept over Baron Dandan mercilessly. What did you say? The breath of death is blowing towards the face. The legs of the long-legged clan should have been very strong and powerful, but at this moment, Baron Eggy's legs are shaking. He racked his brains, thought about it carefully, and hurriedly replied, but he still has two unusual relationships in the Navy. Maybe we can start from this aspect. But those are two admiral-level guys, and they're deep in the Navy headquarters. Do we have a chance? This news is not a secret, but if they are pirates, they will take action against the Navy. The consequences should not be better than the end of angering Loya, right? And the other party is a current Navy general and a former Navy general, both of which are the top powerhouses in the sea. If they want to take action against them, even if the Navy does not find out, they themselves are not so easy to deal with. Aokiji and Zephyr. Charlotte Lingling stared ahead, her eyes lost in memory. Once upon a time, when she was a supernova in the New World, Zephyr was already a terrifying figure in Megatron. The name, General Who Does Not Kill, being able to truly do not kill, also represents the absolutely terrifying power of this person. Later, because his family was assassinated by pirates, Zephyr was disheartened and retreated to the second line, and the three current generals including Aokiji were the ones who stood out immediately. In all fairness, Charlotte Lingling could not despise either of the two. Just Zephyr. Charlotte Lingling smiled when she recalled the information she bought from the black market at a high price. But she quickly restrained her smile, and looked at the three generals. Seriously, Edward Wable, who asked you to contact before, have you found it? Yes, Mother, he has promised to be on time for the tea party, and will bring his mother, Miss Bacon, with him. The answer was Charlotte Katakori, the legendary in an instant. He quickly stood up and sat on the chair before falling asleep slowly. So far the Superman, whose back has never touched the ground at all. I finally heard good news so far. Charlotte Lingling patted her stomach and laughed. Mom, that's really good. Chapter 510 and the Era of Pirates. Why, I'm going to Grand Tesoro soon. On a pirate ship that was snatched up, Annalou squeezed the phone bug with a displeased expression, and complained to Simon over the phone bug. Can't we wait until I get the Golden Emperor before taking action? Gilded Tesoro, known as the Golden Emperor, is the leader of the world's largest entertainment city, Grand Tesoro, and controls many industries around the world. If the simple name is not enough to let the world know how rich this guy is, then the concept of Bailey, who controls 20% of the world, is very easy to understand. In order to create his own golden motto, Annalou planned for this operation for a long time, and even Weber was persuaded to join in. As a result, seeing that he was about to arrive at the destination, Simon asked himself to go back immediately. Annalou only felt that there was a word in his heart that must be said at this moment. MMP. He had already expected this reaction from Annalou, and Simon, who was sitting in the office, issued the next order and said indifferently, the Golden Emperor can do things at any time. His Grand Tesoro, it won't disappear if you put it there. But the four emperors kill one less. Are you sure you want to miss such a big scene? After a pause, Simon took off the receiver, turned it in a different direction, held it between his face and shoulders, and took the documents and pen that his subordinates handed him to sign. Of course, if you really don't come back, I will report it truthfully. Lord Loya's. Annalou. S. Are you threatening me? How dare you threaten me? Do you think I'd be afraid of Loya? Facing Simon's answer, Annalou got angry on the spot. Okay, I'll be back right now. Hanging up the phone, Weber, who had changed into a civilized man, was still holding his soulbound straw in his mouth, carrying a bazooka in one hand and a machete in the other. What? The plan is going to be abandoned. There is a long scar on the corner of his left eye and on his chest, which is the trace left in the battle with the strong men on the sea. Because Loya stayed in the New World, he who had just arrived in Qinghai could only rely on his whimsical sky tactics to deal with the enemy. Can't make much difference. Countless times of survival, countless times of Jedi counterattacks, Weber not only actively awakened observation hockey, but also mastered armament hockey between life and death, and his strength has grown by leaps and bounds. Now he can really be called a war ghost, a war-living evil spirit. Otherwise, just based on his fighting power when he first arrived in Qinghai, Annalou would never take him seriously, let alone invite him to attack the Golden Emperor together. In the face of the inquiry, Annalou spread out his hands. walked to the chairs on the deck and sat down, stretched out his hands and nibbled the apples on the table. No way, with such an important fighting force as me, Lord Loya naturally does not let it go. Hey, this is a trouble that is unique to the Shibukai, you don't understand. Hee hee. The phone bud with its own amplifier made Weber hear the whole story clearly. He ignored the self-proclaimed Anilu. He turned his head and threw an object to the navigator on the pirate ship, and ordered, "Follow this direction and pull as fast as you can." Yes. Having already witnessed his captain being slashed twice by the man with a ferocious expression, the navigator took the pocket watch-like thing tremblingly, ready to let the sailors set sail. But when he opened the lid and saw the little turtle floating in a small pool of seawater inside, his face suddenly turned pale with fright. Turtle Island. Turtle Island, the site of the ice dragon, Loya, is also a forbidden place for the living and a paradise for the dead. 3 days passed in a flash, and Simon knocked on Loya's door with the information documents sorted out. The target is Charlotte Lingling. Why that woman? In all fairness, no matter who the final result is, Loya doesn't really care. But for the many guys he has had contact with, the intelligence is undoubtedly the most advantageous party. Since Simon gave up this advantage and chose Auntie, the reason naturally aroused the curiosity of Loya. In fact, it is precisely because we know Guy so much that we should not target him. Simon replied earnestly, "We are being forced to move forward now, if we really do things absolutely, is the most unfavorable for stabilizing the situation in the sea." Quote. Yes, Turtle Island is now. Because he was still alive, Sengoku understood Loya's thoughts, and then forced Loya to make a decision by betting on the entire naval headquarters. Regardless of whether this decision will lead to a reshuffling of the New World, for the Navy and the world government, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. But for ordinary people, this is not a good thing. After all, the Navy is still an institution under the world government. They also believe in the theory of having a country first and then having a family. For the sake of national peace, sacrificing a small family to help everyone is very worthwhile in their eyes. If Loya aimed more at Guy, it was conceivable that only one of the two who had a deep grievance could only survive, and it just happened to follow Sengoku's wishes. But Sengoku didn't know was that Loya's thoughts were bolder and more decisive than he had guessed. Killing is just to show his strength, and what he wants to do never needs to destroy the 4 emperors. Because Loya is very clear, since the source of the great pirate era is the big secret treasure One Piece, why can't this road be completely blocked from the source? He knows the original book well, and the 2 historical texts of the road signs in the hands of Ant and Guy are exactly the red stones that point to the final island, Ralph drew. As long as you get one of them, announce it to the world in the name of the Ice Dragon, use your fist to make the pirates lose sight of hope, or destroy the historical text of the road sign, then this troubled world will be self-defeating. The era of the great pirates will also come to an end. How many pirates go out to sea, not to become the pirate king? When this ultimate dream is stifled, how many will continue to be pirates? So Sengoku's forced palace, the idea of letting Loya to stabilize the new world for world peace, went in the wrong direction from the beginning. And apart from this, Guy has been dormant for more than a year, and he hasn't seen any news about him for several months. It's hard to imagine how difficult it is to find him in the vast sea. On the other hand, Charlotte Lingling, it's different. The nations are there, and you can't hide it even if you want to hide it, and it's easier to target a little bit. Quote. Speaking of this, Simon touched his chin. As for the third point. Did Aunt Jones kill a pair of Charlotte Lingling's children? I guess they will definitely retaliate. In that case, it's not as good as us. Strike early and nip the threat in its cradle. Quote. If the ant who was thinking about how to get revenge on Loya heard these words, she might be angry and go berserk. The person who killed her children was Loya, but before she could say anything as a victim, others had already planned to raid her hometown. Chapter 511 refers to a deer as a horse. This year has been the best year and the worst year. The wave of the world continued to roll, and it had already turned into a terrible storm that could not be stopped. No one or any force was so insignificant in this storm. Half a month later, when all the personnel were ready, the entire Great Route remained silent, silently watching Turtle Island's every move. Turtle Island's huge mobilization of troops could not hide any forces, and everyone was very concerned about what Loya was going to do this time, but seeing that the Navy only strengthened its vigilance, which made the whole sea feel relieved. Fortunately, it's not for a decisive battle with the Navy headquarters. No matter who the two forces fell, it was a major event that the world could not bear. And for the Navy to win, to be honest, no one expected much at all. During this period of time, all kinds of signal waves and communication methods were blooming, and 100 schools of thought contended. The seemingly peaceful sea had already set off a huge wave in the dark. Everyone is doing their best to inquire about every bit of news about Turtle Island through their own channels. Loya knew about the fluctuations in the outside world, but didn't care. In this world where speaking with fists is more useful, it's fine for other people to look at them, not afraid of you watching, but afraid that you won't. The goal this time is the 4 emperors. If you don't make it grand, isn't it a waste of your energy? Today's Turtle Island held a grand banquet, which was considered a pre-war mobilization, but also for a new companion. Mingd, who returned to his birthplace after leaving the Navy, did not finally follow in the footsteps of the rest until he had settled his personal affairs and officially became a member of Turtle Island. The 3 fingers in the middle of his right hand were broken at the same root, and now they have been replaced by claws made of metal. Loya thought about finding time to replace him with Halu stone. As a right-handed, it is not easy to use the wolf kiba stick in his left hand, so he installed a hidden arrow and a claw blade on his left hand, and the strength of melee and long-range attacks is not bad. From a berserker wielding a wolf kiba stick to an assassin who was assassinated by a grandmaster, Mingdi's change undoubtedly surprised his former partners. The temperament of the whole person has also changed from the second uncle who was like a gang leader to a cold and cruel lone wolf. Something must have happened to him. This major change comes not only from the wounds on his body, but also from the wounds in his heart. But he doesn't want to say it, and they won't ask ignorantly. Only Simon, who knew some details, walked over silently, hugged him gently, and asked, "Has it been resolved?" Then got a silent nod. In any case, the return of old friends is a happy event after all. Today's Turtle Island is peaceful, and there is not a trace of gunpowder smoke before the war. All nations, Cake Island. Mommy, welcome to Cake Island. The fat and tall Charlotte Lingling stood up from the main seat and held the Yuhi wine in front of her. I hope everyone can have a pleasant memory. On both sides of the long dining table in front of her, the people invited to this tea party were seated. Among them are well-known intermediaries in the dark world, dictators of certain countries, big pirates who have become famous in recent years, and some who are lucky enough to escape the purge. The Navy. They are all inextricably linked with the Big Mom pirate group, and many of them are the marriage objects of Charlotte Lingling. Of course, this group of people gathered together, not just for food and drink. After the brief opening remarks, the middle-aged Navy wearing a Major General's cape stood up. He loosened his Yuhi-colored tie nervously, and cleared his throat. Well, Mother, I brought what you asked for. Quote. It can be seen from his title that this person maintains a close relationship with Charlotte Lingling. And a Rear Admiral, what can he bring? A squire came to Charlotte Lingling with a box. She opened the box and glanced at the contents. Thank you, Mommy, Bill. I'm so happy with this gift. Mom likes it. The Major General named Bill wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, looking very frightened. That, Mom. Huh, Bill, what's the matter with you? It was a very kind tone, but this sentence made Bill shudder. However, considering the purpose of his coming to the tea party this time, he still bit Kiba and said with courage, if possible, Mom. Please don't let me do these things in the future. The Navy has recently investigated and cracked down. In order to draw this picture map, I feel like someone has begun to investigate me undercover. So, are you going to disobey my orders, Bill? Before Bill could finish speaking, Charlotte Lingling's face turned cold, her eyes were bloodshot, and she glared at him. You should know the fate of disobeying my orders, even if you were my daughter's husband. Wow. Stared at by her, Bill rolled directly under the table. But he quickly got up tremblingly, because he was afraid that the other party would lose patience because he didn't answer. Nodding again and again, the cold sweat on Bill's head fell on the dim sum with his actions. I'm sorry. I made a blunder. Of course I won't disobey your order. Please rest assured. Looking coldly at Bill, who kept bowing and apologizing, after a few seconds of pause, Charlotte Lingling restrained her expression. This is my mother's good child, not bad. Sarah, let's all have some snacks. A bloody crisis was lifted. Not only Bill, but also a few people who attended the tea party for the first time were relieved. Seeing Charlotte Lingling start enjoying the food, even if she didn't like these sweet and greasy desserts, they all pretended to be enjoying it. Even among the 4 emperors, Charlotte Lingling is the most dangerous one. How many enemies died in her hands? How many more countries have been slaughtered than their hands? If one is not good, they all have to explain it here. The tea party went on in an orderly manner, and everyone exchanged opinions one after another, using the Big Mom pirate group as a link to plan their own interests. After a while, Baron Eggy walked in from the door, and behind him, followed by a burly, fat man with a white beard, and a man with heavy makeup, who was old enough to lean on crutches, short in stature, wrinkled old woman. The two entered the hall, and the eyes of the rest were all focused on them. Looking at the white beard that was almost the same as Whitebeard, everyone knew, the new King Shichibukai, Whitebeard too, Edward Wable. Sorry Mom, we're late. Baron Eggy saluted Charlotte Lingling, and told the reason why he and the others appeared now. In order to avoid being discovered, I let them turn the boat a few times in the middle. It's okay, it's fine as long as you come. Charlotte Lingling clapped her hands, put her eyes on Edward Wable, and said with admiration, it is indeed the son of Whitebeard. Look at this body, he is as strong as a cow, and he is exactly the same as Whitebeard. Except for the beard, there is nothing like it, right? A group of people asked themselves, and then nodded in agreement, yes, yes. Chapter 512, Big Mom, that pulls people into the water. Now that the staff has arrived, some things can be said. After Edward Wable and Miss Bajin took their seats, Charlotte Lingling's eyes suddenly turned gloomy, and her whole body revealed endless evil spirits, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Looking at the silent group of people in front of her, she said slowly, one of my sons, one of my daughters, was killed half a month ago. What? Is there such a thing? Who is so bold? Suddenly, there was an exclamation on the table. Big Mom, pirate group was killed. What's happening here? Not to mention that the other party is the 4 emperors of Kuhn's New World, let alone the cadres under the 4 emperors. How long ago was the last time they suffered damage? And the other party killed the son and daughter of the Big Mom, known for his tyranny. This is such a stupid thing that someone who can't think about it can do it. However, some people were exclaiming, and some people narrowed their eyes and did not express any opinions. The Big Mom pirate group lost 2 cadres, and both of them were the flesh and blood of Charlotte Lingling. Well-informed people have long known this information to Akatsuki. To be honest, a large part of the participants in this tea party knew about it. But precisely because they knew, they never dared to speak. Because in the past 2 weeks, Charlotte Lingling has no sign of revenge at all, and the Angry Legion has all shrunk and stationed in Cake Island, and they have not heard any rumors about where they are going to start. As you can imagine, the difficulty of the other party is obviously beyond imagination. They had not spoken before, just waiting for her to take the initiative to stir up the topic. The people present were not idiots except Whitebeard too. Soon, those who were too shocked to hear the news also came to their senses and gradually became quieter. Seeing the scene was silent for a while, an old man with bald hair raised his hand and asked, then, who is the other party? Also one of the 4 emperors. To make a violent coon like Charlotte Lingling so cautious, the old man really couldn't think of anyone other than the four emperors. Although, Ice Dragon, Loya is powerful, he has no grievances with Charlotte Lingling, and he is in a cold war with the Navy. He can't think of any reason for the other party to do so, nor does he believe that he is an idiot and makes enemies. The Navy immediately made enemies of the four emperors. And if the Navy were changed, I am afraid that the news would have spread to the sea long ago, publicizing these achievements and attacking the prestige of the four emperors. So the biggest possibility is the hands of the other four emperors. You must know that although the four emperors belong to the pirate camp, they have their own grudges. If they would attack Charlotte Lingling's children, it would be completely justifiable and excusable. So, the purpose of holding a tea party now is to unite against a certain four emperors. A group of people pondered the meaning of the words without saying a word. Unexpectedly. No, not them. Charlotte Lingling's head didn't move, only her lips opened and closed. After a pause, she told everyone the truth. The other party is Ice Dragon, Loya. Puff. Several people did not swallow a sip of tea, but were shocked by the news and spit it out, spraying it on the face of the person opposite. But now, neither the sprayer nor the person being sprayed cares about such trivial matters, and they all looked at Charlotte Lingling with disbelief. What? It turned out to be him. Why him? To talk about the existence that these pirates and criminals are most afraid of today, from the bottom to the top, the third place is the Navy, the second is the world government, and the first is the one who is now entrenched at the entrance of the New World. In the kingdom of the dead, Ice Dragon, Loya is up. Excluding those practical factors such as strength, power, influence, etc., the most important reason for determining this ranking is Loyana's unreasonable and uncommunicative attitude. You must know that long before Loya's strength reached its peak, several organizations secretly invited him. At that time, he not only refused, but also turned the cannon fodder who sent the letter into real cannon fodder. At that time, they thought that Loya was loyal to the Navy, so they couldn't communicate, and they didn't care much. As a result, 1 year after the dragon transformation incident, the other party turned away from the Navy. This gave everyone an opportunity to use all means of attracting and recruiting, trying to draw this terrifying monster into their own camp. The results of it. Hey, it's even worse. In the past, the messengers had all become cannon fodder, just some trash fish, and it didn't matter if they died. Good now. Now not only is he dead, but he has also been turned into an undead by Loya, enslaved to work for him, and there are many confidants who are sent by various forces to show their sincerity. Not to mention a lot of information leaks, but to add strength to Turtle Island, the loss is a terrible one. Now, Charlotte Lingling has actually formed a grudge with the Roja who couldn't communicate. The first reaction of this group of people was not to consider how powerful Roja was and whether it was possible to defeat it, but to subconsciously want to escape. Run if you can. However, it was already expected that this group of people would have various reactions. His Royal Highness Katakuri of Cake Island stood in front of the gate one step ahead, folded his arms on his chest, and the old god became the god of the door. It is quite difficult to break through the door from this monster with a bounty of 1 billion and even briefly see through the future. Well, running is not running. Everyone focused their attention and looked at Charlotte Lingling. Then, what are your plans? The speaker is still the bald old man. He may not be the most powerful of the group, but he is the most powerful. He secretly hooked up with the Tianlong people, opened his chamber of commerce over most of the great routes, crushed his opponents through various gray methods, and occupied the largest market share of daily necessities. Don't think that the dark world is all a group of lawbreakers. The killer war wealth and human trafficking are indeed huge profits, but the continuity is the weakest. Only these businesses that are related to everyone's survival needs are the real big ones. Charlotte Lingling glanced at him, then said to him, James. I heard the Navy has placed a large order with you recently. Has it been shipped yet? These things are business secrets. If someone else asked, James would probably point at the other person's nose and scold him, but now he doesn't dare, so he can only answer honestly. It is expected to take about a month, and the Navy recently with the increase in quantity, I can't get so much inventory to give to them. Coupled with the difficulty of distribution in various branches, there is still a large number of orders left to be completed. Orders from the Navy headquarters. Are there any more? Navy headquarters. James's bald head was a little dazzling in the light. His pupils shrank and he took a deep breath. Yes. It will be delivered in a week. That's good. Charlotte Lingling laughed happily, then he ignored the crowd of onlookers with different expressions, and looked at the nearest Edward Wable and Miss Ba-jin who were sitting next to him. Ms. Ba-jin, I don't know what you think of Loya and Ba-jin. What do you think about Zepha's relationship? Ho ha ho ha ho. Chapter 513 A Box Full of Cups. At this moment, Loya still doesn't know that Charlotte Lingling has already started to attack his teacher Zepha's idea. He is busy dispatching troops and sending the Legion out of Turtle Island. Charlotte Lingling is very strong, but he can't make him feel intimidated. Just considering that the other party is a superhuman type with the ability of soul and soul fruit, he is very good at controlling the soul, and innately restrains the undead army. In order to avoid unnecessary losses, it was necessary for the Legion to march in secret. Besides, doesn't the other party want to create a country where all races in the world live together? So Loya plans to use the characteristics of the undead army and the entire world as a bargaining chip to force Charlotte Lingling to compromise and hand over the historical text of the road sign to him. It is only after decades of hard work that the current world has been created. Loya doesn't believe that if all nations are destroyed, she still has the character and patience to rebuild a new one. When he gets the historical text of the road sign, he can confidently say, One Piece will completely disappear from this era. On the coast of Turtle Island, watching the special sailboats sink into the sea and disappear below the sea level, Anilu pursed his cheeks. Then what do? We are also responsible for attacking all countries. He is a devil fruit person, let him learn to sail secretly from below the sea level like the undead army, but he doesn't want his life. Therefore, it is impossible for him to make a sneak attack. If he made a frontal breakthrough, the Big Mom pirate group must have taken precautions. So, I will only take action against the ant, and the rest of the cadres and soldiers will be handed over to you. By the way, I will test the results of your practice for so long. Luoya said indifferently, I deal with those little pirates all day long. I wonder if you can laugh so easily in the face of the strong men under the banner of the Four Emperors. Che, it's not just a cadre of the Four Emperors. Nilu is still full of confidence. It's enough to sink the Cake Island, but I want to see how many people can survive my thunder. The new version of Taiko that Ratchet created for him is terrifying for Enel's strength increase. Lei Ying, a terrifying move that originally required a lot of thunderclouds to accumulate power, has now become Enel's common skill. For him, who suffers from the phobia of firepower, there is nothing that can't be solved by one shot of Lei Ying. If there is, then 2 shots. Of course, even with that being said, Enel's hand holding the golden scepter couldn't help but tighten a bit. As Loya said, the opponents they had come into contact with in the past were all insignificant little pirates, and even if they were the overlords of the evil side, there was a world of difference between them and the Four Emperors. This battle is the first time they have fought against a real powerhouse. Knowing the goal of this trip, Tony silently pulled the bone kun out of the scabbard, and the silky yuhi-colored granulation slowly wrapped around the tiger's mouth, licking the sharp blade. The cadres under the banner of the Four Emperors. I don't know what their blood smells like. A few days later, the headquarters of the Navy. A merchant ship slowly approached the bay port in front of the headquarters fortress under the supervision of naval soldiers. One of Loya's former subordinates, Rear Admiral Lo, was responsible for inspection and registration. This ship is full of daily necessities. There are too many new soldiers in the Navy. Even if only a small part can enter the headquarters through the layers of tests, it is still a huge number, which leads to insufficient stock in the past, so it is necessary to order a little. Mr. James, why did you bring it here yourself? Looking at the old man who got off the boat, Major General Luo Wei said in surprise. This is the head of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce, and it was a bit beyond Luo's expectations that he would come in person because of a boat of cheap daily necessities. Faced with the inquiry, James sighed secretly in his heart, but he pretended to be calm on the surface, and greeted Luo with a smile. After all, it is something that the adults of the Navy headquarters need, and I am also afraid of accidents. It's not the same as before. Not a single pirate dares to appear within a few days' voyage around the headquarters. Your worries are a little unnecessary. Luo smiled and shook his head without explaining much. But since the thing has been delivered, no matter who delivered it, just follow the procedure. Immediately, he ordered the soldiers behind him to board the ship to check the quantity of the cargo, and then together with the sailors, he carried down the boxes of cargo and unloaded them at the port. Okay, the quantity is okay, the quality is okay. Happy cooperation, Mr. James. When notified, Luo and James shook hands. Okay, the old man will say goodbye first. The Navy headquarters is a serious place. If James wants to stay there, it is very out of line. So he didn't do anything suspicious, and honestly got on the boat and set sail. After sending James away, Luo instructed the soldiers at the port, "You guys, count some and send them to the headquarters fortress, and move the rest to the town, understand?" The consumption of daily necessities is huge, not only for the soldiers, but also for the family members of the Navy in the town. Soon, the soldiers counted the part that was sent to the headquarters, and shouted the number to send it to the trailer. In places they hadn't found, a few boxes trembled slightly, as if there was something alive inside. And most of these boxes are going to be sent to the family town, but one box was sent to the headquarters fortress. When they placed the goods, they had a plan to make sure that the goods in front were enough for the headquarters, and this last part would definitely be sent to the family town. But I didn't expect that the Navy counted the points in reverse, starting from the last batch. It happened that the problematic box was clicked into the batch sent to the fortress. But now the guys in the box don't know that things have changed, and they stay in the box honestly, preparing for their plan to secretly kidnap Zephyr. A batch of goods was sent to the family town. Of course, there is no need to move it into the warehouse uniformly. Naturally, the bosses of various storefronts came to claim it. A shop owner who sells tea supplies filled in the name of his shop on the document in the hands of the Navy, and then dragged the box back to the shop at the other's direction. Finally, when it was quiet outside, he closed the door on the grounds of sorting out the goods, and then respectfully tapped the box 3 times. After a 2-second pause, he struck 3 more times. Whoa! The box that was supposed to hold the tea set was suddenly broken open, and a chubby golden hairball jumped out from it. Pokemus shook his head, swept away the straw on his head, and let out a long sigh of relief. Suffocating me. Then he looked at the respectful man in front of him and smiled contentedly. Well done, Bilbom. Where are the others? The other lords are here, Lord Pokermus. Bilbom bent slightly, and continued to bang on the rest of the boxes as he had just done. Soon, the officers of the Big Mom pirate group hidden in the boxes broke open the boxes and got out, enjoying warm Yuhi tea under the service of Beerbomb. But at this time, the last box did not move at all. Pokemus and Charlotte Blay looked at each other, and had a bad feeling in their hearts. The only thing left is Lady Garrett, right? Pokermus said. Sir Garrett probably wouldn't fall asleep inside. Zephyr, who has been abolished, is not terrible. If you really want to kidnap him, it is enough to arrange any combatant. But this is the headquarters of the Navy after all. Just in case, Charlotte Lingling arranged for several important combat forces to go together. Among them, Bree, the superhuman, Mirror Fruit, ability who can lock the target in the mirror world, and Garrett, who can bind the opponent, have unique advantages whether it is fighting or kidnapping. Now that everyone else has arrived, it's just Garrett. Pokemus didn't believe that Garrett would forget the code she set before departure, or would fall asleep in the suitcase. In other words, jumping off the box, Pokemus threw off the teacup in his hand and came to the last box. He grabbed the lid of the box with both hands and slammed it up. Ah, Lord Bree, Lord Garrett is not in it. It's a box full of cups. Chapter 514 Fujitora smiled. Be careful, this box is all glass china. In the warehouse of the headquarters fortress, the soldiers move the goods one by one into the warehouse under the command of a colonel. The handling of daily necessities is commanded by a colonel. Even if he is only a major, it is enough to see how the mid-range combat power of the Navy has skyrocketed after the big conscription. It can be said that now, apart from the 4 emperors, no pirate force in the sea is looked down upon by the current Navy. This is a kind of confidence, but it is also a kind of sadness. Because even if it is so powerful now, the Navy does not have the confidence to fight against the Ice Dragon, Loa, who has severely damaged Sengoku and others. Courage is not a problem, but if you can't see the difference in strength between the two sides, it will make people laugh. Therefore, these newly recruited Navy masters are holding a fire in their hearts at this moment, and they have nowhere to vent. The major's vicious appearance didn't help, instead it made the 2 guys who were carrying the goods tremble. One of them took a step slower, and the box lost its support and fell heavily to the ground. PFF'd. Bang! The 2 soldiers were startled and looked at their commander with trepidation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Wait, there is a situation. The major officer pulled out his saber with his backhand, ignoring the soldier's apology, and instead looked at the still box with a serious look. This box contains cups and teapots, right? The rest of the soldiers were stunned for a moment, then immediately came to their senses, loaded the bullets with a click, and aimed them at the box. That's right, looking at the signs on the outside, this box should contain glass cups and ceramic teapots. It flew out and fell to the ground, and the contents inside should have been cracked and shattered long ago. But the sound just now was obviously not the sound of something shattering. Not good in every sense. After the fall, there was no movement outside. If something fell on the ground, could it be left there? And with Bilbom's cowardly character, how dare he be disrespectful to himself? However, this is what happened now. The box that he was hiding in was thrown to the ground, and no one came to help him for so long. Besides something unpredictable outside, Garrett couldn't think of any other reason why she would be lying here. At this moment, she suddenly felt a warning sign in her heart, and without thinking about it, she broke through the box and got out. Bang bang bang. Almost the second after she left the box, a bullet pierced through the wooden box, knocking the small box into pieces. Damn. Garrett and the Navy major bit Kiba at the same time, and the latter immediately stabbed with his sword, trying to take down the unknown enemy hidden in the box. Humph. A little major wants to deal with me too. Garrett kept falling freely, and at the moment when she was about to be stabbed, she violently twisted her waist and threw her left foot out. The jade feet wrapped around armament hockey, like an iron whip, directly ripped off the weapon in the major's hand, and threw him heavily to the other end of the warehouse. Just a few glances at the surrounding environment, Garrett still doesn't know where she is. Why am I in the headquarters fortress? The plan shouldn't be like this. What should I do? Lady Garrett has been sent to the Navy headquarters, it will be discovered. A group of people is a little panicked now, that is Charlotte Lingling, own flesh and blood, one of the ministers of Topland, and the one with the highest status in their group. Even if they complete the task of kidnapping Zepha, if they can't save Garrett, they will be severely punished when they go back. Don't panic. The most important thing now is to find Lady Garrett. Maybe she hasn't been violent yet. Just after Kemuzi finished speaking, there was a sudden thud outside the store. Banging sound. A group of people immediately quieted down and hid in the hidden shadows. Bilbom tidied up his clothes and pulled the door open a crack. The Navy soldier outside glanced at him and said, "Mr. Bill, we received a notice just now that an enemy has invaded the naval headquarters, so it is very likely that their accomplices are hiding here. Before we are sure of safety, just stay at home and don't move around, you know. There is such a thing. Bilbom pretended to be surprised and scared, and then thanked the soldier with sincerity. Well then, I have to go next door and inform Father Will that his pub must be closed today. After speaking, the Navy soldier waved his hand and turned to leave. As he walked, he muttered, invading the naval headquarters alone, why does the little girl think she is Guy? Closing the door, the faces of Pokemus, Bree and the others were very ugly. Also said that Garrett was not exposed, and everyone else's news was sent to the town. Several people's faces were extremely ugly, and they didn't know what to say. After a while of silence, Pokemus said, Master Bry, Mother wants us to kidnap Zephyr back. Your fruit ability is essential. I see, are you going alone? At this moment, Bray can't see the usual publicity. The behemoth of the Navy headquarters is far from what they can resist. Facing the question, Pokemus nodded. Yes, it's not good if there are too many people. I will bring a mirror. As long as I find Lord Garrett, I must pull her into the mirror world. Garrett couldn't die here, even if she died. The two sides have completed the total, and the soldiers are divided into two groups, each going in different directions. The sound of gunshots from the headquarters fortress immediately attracted the attention of the rest of the people. Don't look at the square not far away, the recruits who practiced shooting all day long. But inside the fortress, shooting is strictly prohibited. Without waiting for the report, a group of soldiers followed the tall man in front and hurriedly headed towards the warehouse. Soon, Garrett knocked down the soldier at the corner, exposing her figure in front of a group of people. Don't move, or we'll shoot. The muskets were aimed at Garrett. She just stood up and swept back in disdain. Che, a lieutenant general wants to arrest me too. She moved her wrists, raised her hands, and a large mass of sticky things detached from her hands and rushed towards the Navy not far away. If they were enveloped by these things, these soldiers would not be able to break free by their own strength. But they are not fighting alone. In front of them, there is the monster lieutenant general who has recently gained fame. Fujitora smiled. I am sorry. Sensing the fluctuations coming from the front, Fujitora pleaded guilty, and slightly pulled the short knife around his waist from the scabbard. Then, boom! The wide floor several meters ahead collapsed, and together with Garrett's attack, it was heavily pressed into the deep pit. The entire headquarters fortress trembled under the influence of this terrifying gravity. No matter how much Garrett struggled, the gravity pressing on her body did not shift in the slightest. Unknown enemy, the old man is now announcing in the name of Vice Admiral Fujitora Smile, you have been arrested. Chapter 515 Infiltrate the Navy Headquarters. The terrifying gravity affected Garrett's internal organs, not to mention turning her head. She had to do her best to even breathe. All of a sudden, Garrett felt pain like tearing from the skin all over her body, as if Linkai wanted to smash her into tens of thousands of pieces. That's when Fujitora felt that she still had the strength to struggle, and added some strength to her hand. Puff! This time, Garrett couldn't hold it any longer and vomited out a mouthful of blood. But the pool of blood didn't fly too high, before it crossed the bridge of the nose, and then immediately slid down the cheek. Under the blessing of gravity, some unspit out flowed into her trachea along with her movements, causing her to cough uncontrollably. Snot, tears and blood spread all over Garrett's pretty little face, and the hair around her ears was clumped together. It can be said that she has never been so embarrassed since she was born. Damn, Navy, kind of you killed me. Garrett glared at Fujitora fiercely, gaining a clearer understanding of how cunning the Navy was. As a leader of the Big Mom pirate group, she has long faced off against the Vice Admiral of the Navy's headquarters. It is true that those lieutenant generals have very solid basic skills, Grandmaster Sixtile and Domineering, and they can hardly find any obvious weaknesses, and all of them are not good. But compared with her, except for a few powerful backbones, the rest of the lieutenant generals are not her opponents at all. At this time, with the increase of gravity, Garrett quickly recognized who the man in front of her was. I thought that the blind lieutenant general who came out of this world's military conscription was the strongest at the level of the flying squirrel ghost spider. No matter how strange the transmission of its fruit ability, she would not be afraid of the domineering and powerful. But Garrett smiled bitterly at the moment. How could this be an ordinary lieutenant general? You tell me this is a lieutenant general. Even the Aokiji Kyabu who was once a lieutenant general was first class. Compared to the Fujitora smile in front of him, it was far from enough. In other words, this is an existence that is stronger than a lieutenant general and comparable to a naval admiral. A general with the title of lieutenant general. The Navy is killing people. If you have something to say, go and tell Marshal Sengoku. After confirming that the opponent had no strength to resist, Fujitora retracted the sword and sheathed it, and the terrifying gravity suddenly disappeared. The old man is only here to catch the criminals who invaded the headquarters, and he has no right to kill them. This is Fujitora's style of laughing, and the justice he insists is the law. Even though he had already guessed that this person was a pirate, he did not kill him. You blind man still know how to pity fragrance and cherish jade. Garrett replied indifferently, and then was handcuffed by the soldiers brought by Fujitora. It's not that she didn't think about resisting, but her body no longer allows her to move. Muscles, bones, internal organs, the whole body was on the verge of collapse under the weight just now. If Fujitora had not insisted on the law and could not kill her, she would have turned into a pancake at this moment. To this question, Fujitora didn't answer, beckoned, and two soldiers dragged Garrett with one arm and dragged her away like a dog. If Pokemus had calmed down, he would have known how ridiculous it was that he hoped Garrett wasn't arrested. From the Bay Port to the family town, this distance is long enough for the soldiers to go back and forth between the headquarters fortress and the port several times. The moment they heard the news from the Navy soldiers at Beerbohm's house, Garrett had already been captured by Fujitora. Avoiding the Navy patrolling all the way, he slowly detoured to the foot of the fortress of the headquarters, and when he looked up, his calf was softening. It is in this building complex that at least one admiral is stationed all year round. At least 5 or 6 lieutenant generals. At least tens of thousands of naval elites. In addition, a Marshal Sengoku, who basically does not go out, and various secret units of the Navy. Not to mention going to save Garrett, just going in will be as difficult as going to the sky. Especially since he's a fur tribe. Jowu carried that isolated country on his back, and basically no one would leave. If you want to see a fur tribe in the outside world, it is more difficult than seeing a mermaid. As long as he dares to appear in the sight of others, ghosts know there is a problem. Bang bang bang. Suddenly, a few knocks echoed in the corner of the alley, and Pokemus was startled, and the hair on his body stood up. Looking around carefully, he found that there was no one else around. Suddenly, Pokemus remembered the mirror in his arms, and he was relieved when he took it out. It turned out to be you, Mr. Bray. You scared me to death. Bree's old witch's face is so scary on weekdays, but seeing it at this moment, Pokemus only felt a touch of kindness. Pokermus, have you found Garrett? The rest of the people involved in the kidnapping plan are hidden in Bree's mirror space, and unless they have special perception abilities, no one can find their existence. Faced with this question, Pokemus said dejectedly, "Not yet, I can't even enter the naval headquarters. Their patrol circle is too dense, and there is no chance at all." In order to find something to do for the newly joined soldiers and let them familiarize themselves with the environment as soon as possible, the number of patrol teams in the Navy headquarters during this period is terrifying. If it weren't for the good foundation of Pokemus itself, it would have been discovered long ago when it penetrated into the periphery. As expected, that's why I'm contacting you now. After listening to Pokemus' words, Bree was not as anxious as she thought. I just found a mirror inside the fortress. From the outside judging from the scene, it should be an unmanned warehouse. You come into the mirror space first, and I will take you in directly. That's great, Lord Bree. Pokemus was overjoyed and raised his head excitedly. Before Fujitora and his party reached Sengoku's office, a group of soldiers hurried over from the corner. Seeing Fujitora, they saluted subconsciously and moved on. But when they saw the man behind Fujitora, the veteran soldiers suddenly held their breath. Fuji, Lieutenant General Fujitora, is that the daughter of the 4 emperors, Charlotte Lingling? Huh. Hearing this sentence, Fujitora turned his head in surprise. He stared at a pair of cloudy white eyeballs, and said in surprise, 4 emperors. Are you sure? Sure, very sure. The soldier swallowed. The Navy fought with them more than 10 years ago, and I was one of them at the time. The scar on my stomach was left by their cadre. Is that so? Fujitora snorted and faced Garrett. I didn't expect you to be so big. Since you are the daughter of the 4 emperors, you must have a big plan to sneak into the Navy headquarters. What do you say? Garrett didn't have the slightest timidity after being exposed, but looked at Fujitora with disdain and spit on the ground. To be able to maintain such a tough attitude after being arrested, no matter whether or not Charlotte Lingling brought her the confidence, this woman's heart and backbone should not be underestimated. Well, the old man is only in charge of arresting you, and the intelligence matters should be left to the marshal. After saying that, Fujitora said goodbye to the group of soldiers and continued to move in the opposite direction of the marshal's office. The reconstructed headquarters of the fortress has added a lot of facilities and layouts on the original basis, which is much more complicated than the previous layered structure. So as a blind man, Fujitora smiled that he seemed probably lost. Chapter 516 The Spy Beside Loya. Fujitora has been in the Navy for several months, and because he is blind, he stays at the headquarters most of the time. Even after such a long stay, he was still a little confused about the current route of the fortress, let alone Pokemus, who was here for the first time. The good news is that the room Bree sent him to was indeed an empty warehouse. That mirror was ordered by one of Major General Lalakan's bosses, Loli, and no one dares to come here and touch it unless she wants a new one. However, the bad news is that the warehouses where these daily necessities are located are often very remote. An outsider who is not familiar with the route starts from here and wants to find someone in the huge fortress. As a result, Pokemus was also honorably lost. Dong 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 dong. With his claws clasped in the gap, clinging to the ceiling, Pokemus watched the soldiers below run away, and heaved a sigh of relief. There are so many people, when will we find out if this goes on? The patrolling soldiers have passed. According to the time of the previous waves, there will be no second batch of patrols here in a few minutes. He took the time to jump down from it, tiptoe and hunched forward. Just as he passed a corner, the sound of footsteps in front of him made him stop. Damn, why are there still people? The sweaty Pokemus looked left and right, feeling a little despair at this transparent corridor. As the footsteps got closer, Pokemus couldn't help swallowing. Lieutenant General Fujitora, this is the right way. Under the correction of the soldier behind him, Fujitora smiled embarrassedly, took back the steps he stepped out, and turned around and stepped into this corridor. This corridor is close to the outer wall, and it was specially set aside to see the scenery, so various potted plants are placed in the corners. Just. Who left the rag doll here? Passing by, a soldier scratched his head strangely and looked at the lion doll sitting on the ground in the corner, feeling very puzzled. I guess whose daughter came to visit Dad and left the toys here. The soldier beside him smiled and recalled the last time his daughter came to see him. Don't worry about it, when they can't find the toy and cry and make a fuss, they will come back and get it. Is that so? The soldier did not suspect him, and after saying a few words about the troubles of being a single dog, he put the matter behind him. But what everyone didn't notice was that when Garrett saw the ragdoll, her pupils shrank in a circle. Garrett's current tragic situation fell into the eyes of Pokemus, which also made him extremely anxious. But it was clear that even Garrett was no match for the opponent, and if he, a combatant, attacked violently, the result would not be much better. Quietly raised his paws and pulled open the clothes on his chest, revealing the corner of the mirror hidden there. Garrett returned a clear look and continued to be dragged forward. After several twists and turns, Fujitora finally came to the marshal's office. For some reason, he breathed a sigh of relief, and then knocked on the door. "Come in." A strong male voice came from behind the door, leaving only two soldiers dragging Garrett, and Fujitora stepped inside. At this moment, a lot of people have gathered in the marshal's office, including Marshal Sengoku, as well as Kizaru and Akainu from the three generals, and even Lieutenant General Crane was already seated waiting for him. After receiving the information from below, they knew that Fujitora had caught the trespasser. "Fujitora, are you lost again?" It was clearly a question sentence, but Sengoku's tone was only firm. Sengoku felt deeply helpless as one of the two kuibao obtained in this conscription could not remember the route. "Well, sorry for keeping you all waiting." Fujitora himself smiled awkwardly, apologizing to his colleagues. Then, he asked the soldiers to bring Garrett forward and saluted Sengoku. "Report to the marshal, the criminal who invaded the headquarters has been brought. Thank you for your hard work. Find a seat and sit down." Sengoku nodded with a wry smile, not wanting to argue with Fujitora. As Fujitora took his seat, all eyes of the group were on Garrett. This kind of collective gaze from more than half of the Navy leaders, even the cadre of the Big Mom pirate group, Garrett swallowed nervously. Charlotte Garrett, Charlotte Lingling, 18th daughter, Minister of Butter of Totland, of all nations, currently unmarried. Sengoku pinched the document. I read it out word by word, then looked up at Garrett, and asked calmly, "Is there anything else to add?" "Now that you know who I am, what are you going to do?" Garrett smiled disdainfully. "If you want to be tortured, feel free to come. I won't betray my mother." No, I think you have made a mistake." Sengoku folded his hands, posing the signature gesture of Commander Akari, only showing a pair of majestic eyes, staring at Garrett. "I only care about the purpose of your coming here. For Charlotte Lingling, a dead person, and it doesn't matter." Dead. Garrett took a deep breath, and then realized that this should be Sengoku's scheming, and immediately laughed. "Are you kidding me, Sengoku? Mom is alive and well now, it's not your turn to worry about her life and death." Quote. This answer is not surprising. Sengoku is still in a hurry, and said lightly, "It seems that you are very confident in her." "Of course." Garrett raised her head proudly. "Mom is a woman who wants to become the pirate king. The existence that will control the sea in the future." "Well, that's it." Sengoku's mouth curled into a small smile, and he said something that made Garrett feel chills all over. "I don't know if she can still do what you want after the war with Loya." Ice Dragon. Loa. This is a sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of all the members of the nations. It is precisely because they know that they are invincible that they will find a way to kidnap Zephyr and let Loya cast the mouse. It is not surprising that the Navy was able to detect the information that Mascarpone and Mascarpone were killed. Combined with their unique intelligence network, it is understandable that Akatsuki came from Loya. However, why take it out now? You must know that they are only secretly arranging to prevent Loya from attacking. Although Loya has mobilized a large number of troops, he has never heard the news of the undead army going to sea. Even the spies secretly arranged in the waters near Turtle Island did not find a single ship sailing out of Turtle Island. So it's hard to say whether this battle will be fought or not. Where does Sengoku have the confidence to judge that Charlotte Lingling is cold? Wait, don't tell me. Garrett took a deep breath. Loya has already sent troops. You still have a spy with him. How could the undead army betray their master? It's not enough to use a living person as a spy. Garrett's IQ was up to par, and she could guess Sengoku's layout from just one sentence, so he stopped hiding and said with a sneer. So no matter how she struggles, Charlotte Lingling will definitely die. Tell me honestly about your goals if you know each other, and I can consider putting you in a Navy prison instead of going to the city to suffer. The insidious Navy. Listening to the preferential treatment given by Sengoku, Garrett muttered in a complicated manner, with no expression on her face. Dong dong dong. Just then, there was a knock on the door. To be able to disturb them at this time, there is no one else except the late Aokiji. With permission, Aokiji pushed open the door and walked in, picking up the stuffed lion with one broken arm in his hand, and clasping the other hand on his fluffy hair. I'm sorry I am late, but for the sake of me catching another intruder, can you, Marshall, get away with not punishing me? Garrett stared at the unknowing Pokemus in Aokiji's hand, bit Kiba and said, you bastards. Chapter 517 Broken Hope. Speaking of which, Pokemus himself was unlucky. After deceiving Fujitora and his party, he hung far behind them, repeated his old tricks along the way, and arrived at the marshal's office safely. Then he sat outside honestly, acting as his stuffed toy. It was filled with high-ranking Navy officers, and he wasn't irrational enough to rush in to save people. He had already calculated in his heart that as soon as he heard that the other party would lock Garrett, he would retreat. As a cadre under the banner of the Four Emperors, the Navy will never directly execute him. This is equivalent to giving them time to save people. Now that the enemy is in the dark, there is a great chance of rescuing Garrett. But the cups are coming. Pokemus never thought that someone would be late for the dignified naval meeting. And the latecomer is not an ordinary character, even a top-level expert like a Navy admiral. At first, Aokiji looked at him, and only regarded him as a toy dropped by someone's daughter. However, considering that there is a meeting inside, what if someone else puts the toy here intentionally, and there is a phone bug inside? Before Sengoku and the others came back to take charge of the overall situation, the agents of the world government had all made a concerted effort, racking their brains to seize the little secrets of the Navy to threaten them. During the battle of wits and courage during that period of time, Aokiji developed a suspicion of paranoia, and when he saw this plush toy in a very strange position, he immediately squatted down to examine it carefully. Then, the Pokemon gets cold. Without using observation hockey, he can still use his appearance to deceive others. When Aokiji plays the real thing, the sound from his body cannot escape the perception of the other party. What's this? A stuffed toy? Kizaru said slyly. Hey, Aokiji, don't joke around like this. It's just a few more missions, so you don't need to come out with such a lame reason, right? No, that's not a stuffed toy. Akainu lowered the brim of his hat and smelled the second kind of bloody smell in the air. If you guessed correctly, he should be the legendary fur tribe, right? That fur race with human-like intelligence, but all humanoid beasts. All the people present are seniors, and when they heard the reminder, they immediately understood the meaning of the 3 words fur tribe. Immediately, Akainu smiled. Big Mom really found some weird stuff to fill the races of the nations. Last time I heard that a mermaid was bought by her pirates, and it is estimated that it has been sent to the nations. This time it turned out to be the fur tribe. Quote. Ah la la, that's why I want to make up for it. Aokiji buttoned his hair and looked up at Sengoku expectantly. I'll talk to you later. Sengoku gave Aokiji a white look, and then continued to say to Garrett, how is it? Your companion seems to want to rescue you, and now we've caught it too. Do you have any hope of escape? Grabbed by Aokiji with one hand, Pokemus tried to open his eyes and said weakly, I am sorry, Lady Garrett. I failed. Looking quietly at the Pokemus in front of her, Garrett raised her hand slowly, as if she wanted to touch his face. Sengoku thought that the relationship between the two was very good, so he did not stop it immediately. The residual body temperature of Pokemus came from her palm, and Garrett pursed her lips with hot tears in her eyes. No, Pokemus, you have done enough. Sudden. She slipped her hand and landed on the collar of Pokemus, and the handle of the mirror was exposed, and she could get it by probing her hand. This sudden move made Sengoku and others a little confused. Taking this opportunity, Garrett pulled the mirror out of Pokemus's arms and shouted loudly, Bray. Bang. The scene flashed by, but Garrett could clearly see her sister's appearance. However, he could only see the appearance clearly. Before he could activate the fruit ability to pull Garrett into the mirror space, the mirror was shattered by Aokiji's kick in Garrett's hand. Broken not only the mirror, but also her last hope for rescue. Garrett! Garrett! Bree also saw the flashing picture clearly. But in just an instant, the mirror was kicked to pieces. In the panic, Bree only saw a fragment of the mirror, reflecting the appearance of Aokiji. The broken picture was immediately burned by lava, and Bree knew that Garrett could not be saved. A feeling of silence and sadness lingered in the mirror space. Everyone was silent, and the emotions were complicated and speechless. After a long time, Diesel said in a low voice, "What shall we do now, Lord Bree?" He didn't say a word. After the mirror was exposed, Garrett was sure that she couldn't escape. After returning, what awaits them will be severe punishment from Charlotte Lingling. Through the mirror just now, they also heard the conversation of Sengoku and others, and understood what kind of threat the Big Mom pirate group is facing now. Is it to continue to kidnap Zephyr and try to save his life when he goes back? Still, just leave the Big Mom pirate group, and the most important thing is to live. But Diesel didn't dare to say this. Can Bree think about whether she would make such a decision? That's Bree's business, and she has the right to make a decision. But if he said it now, it would be Yuhi Gugwo's betrayal, and he would be attacked mercilessly by the rest. I don't know if she didn't understand what Diesel was saying or what. Bree turned her head to look at a large mirror in the washroom, looking at Aine, who was busy in the kitchen not far from the entrance, and bit Kiva and said, "Do it." Mirror. The hot magma devoured the shattered lens completely, and wisps of black smoke rose from the magma with a pungent stench. A cold wind blew calmly. Aokiji stepped on the frozen black magma and touched his chin. "Do you know who I think of? The freak who got his face cut by his husband. Superman is a mirror fruit. This ability is used to escape, which is much more convenient than the door fruit of Bruno, who came to pick them up a few months ago. With such a powerful and strange fruit, its owner is naturally backed up in the Navy." After taking a sentence, Huang Yuan pouted his face with a sullen face. "It's really dangerous. If she escapes into the mirror world, we really have no good way to take her." "Shut up." Suddenly, Garrett let out a low voice. Her hair was disheveled, she couldn't see the beauty of the past, and the blood on her face made her more like a ghost. She stared fiercely at Kizaru and roared, "My sister is not a freak. Normal people like you naturally can't feel their feelings." Kizaru put his feet on the parallel chairs and carelessly blew his nails. "Do you think just your brothers and sisters? How many are there? A man who can still be called a human. Freak is already a polite name, if you really want to say." Huang Yuan raised his head slightly and sneered, "They are a group of monsters that are neither human nor beast." "Asshole." Garrett stood up angrily. Even with the Halu stone in her hands, she struggled to pounce on Kizaru with some strength she didn't know where. Then, he was released by Aokiji on the other side of the office, sinking deeply into the wall. With this appearance, there should be nothing to come out of interrogation. Sengoku didn't say anything to Kizaru's words. He pondered for a while, stood up and walked out. "Lock her up first, use torture to destroy her. Break her will. The rest is up to you, Crane. Understand?" Sighing slightly, Crane stared at Sengoku's back and lowered his gaze. Chapter 518 Say Hello. That's Cake Island. What a sight to see. Standing on the bow of the boat, Anilu put his hand on his eyes and looked at the strange island that appeared on the sea level. It is obviously an island, but it looks like a colorful cake. Even standing here, you can smell the fragrance wafting from the island. Through newspapers, photos, etc., the rest of the people knew that there was such an island in the sea, but when it really came into view, they were still shocked and sighed that the great route was so strange and well-deserved. At the bow of the sailboat hangs a wooden dragon totem, surrounded by ice crystals, clouds and the sea in blue and white. The pattern appeared in the sea for a short time, but no matter who it was, the boats that hung the sign would shy away. Some were reluctant to get involved with them because of warnings from the Navy. Some are simply afraid of death and dare not be approached by them. Looking at the whole new world, it is more of the latter. Get closer to the island and the waves calm down. A group of pure white ice wolves ran on the sea. Every time they took a step forward, a wide ice road appeared under their feet. Even if there was a turbulent current stirred up by the ship not far behind, these ice layers had no tendency to be damaged in the slightest. On the way here, even in the face of huge waves 100 meters high, the ice wolves were not afraid at all, ramming on the top of the waves, not to mention the currents stirred by the ships. Behind the undead knights of the ice wolf group, there is a huge ice wolf, walking forward step by step on the ice. The person sitting on its back is even taller than the deck of the sailboat, making the supposedly small figure look so stalwart. Hearing Analu's words, the hell-flying Loya opened his eyes and cast a glance at him. If you have time to be shocked, why don't you go say hello? Huh. Analu was stunned at first, and then he understood that Loya was letting him do it himself. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and sky-blue thunder continued to flash in the air around him. Okay, Lord Loya. Mom, no, Ice Dragon Loya is here. There was nothing to hide about the appearance of Loya and others. Since they discovered Cake Island, of course Cake Island also discovered them. In fact, when she went to sea a few days ago, Charlotte Lingling received the news and began to prepare for the challenge. Is it coming? She hadn't rested in the past few days. Charlotte Lingling sat on the large seat and opened her bloodshot eyes. Just a few days ago, her daughter Charlotte Garrett, Totland's butter minister, had an accident. The life paper can not only indicate the position of the deity, but also reflect the vitality of the deity. At this moment, the life paper in Charlotte Lingling's hand was only a tiny bit of debris. Unlike Ace's week before execution, the current Garrett really only had one breath left. And even if she contacted Bray, all she got was an unreachable answer. Did the mission fail? Garrett and others were wiped out. But who can explain to her why only the life papers of Garrett and Pokemus responded, and the others' life papers had no problems at all? A bold idea appeared in Charlotte Lingling's heart, and she asked herself, does Bray really have the courage? However, these issues should not be considered now, and how to deal with Loya's attack is the top priority now. If she can't survive this war, it doesn't matter whether Bray betrayed the family or not, it has nothing to do with her. Has the Legion of Wrath set off? Looking at Baron Dandin next to her, Charlotte Lingling asked. All of them have gone to the seaside, and enough soldiers have been transferred from other islands. In terms of strength, we have an absolute advantage. Well, it's just a military advantage. Baron Dandin couldn't help sighing. The undead army under the opponent's banner, even a small cannon fodder, was a big pirate with a bounty of at least tens of millions, and there were countless members with a bounty of hundreds of millions. No matter how confident he is, and no matter how overestimated the strength of Wang Guo, he will not be able to close the gap. But don't be too discouraged, Charlotte Lingling's Hormes is very simple to take shape. If you let go, all the residents of the world can become their soldiers. At that time, if the crowd tactics are adopted, the piles can kill thousands of undead legions. Of course, what determines the real direction of this war is the battle between Charlotte Lingling and Loya. If she fails, no amount of soldiers will matter. The top-level powerhouse has the power to ignore all the trash and turn the tide of the battle. At this moment, a sense of danger came to him, and Baron Dandin looked up at the ceiling. The source of this sense of danger was the sky outside. Mom. Thunderbolt. Charlotte Lingling frowned. That new Shichibukai, Thor, Analu. At this moment, the Cake Island has long been messed up, and endless dark clouds are entrenched in the entire Cake Island. It is clear that the sky is clear, but it is dark like hell. People who didn't know it thought that Big Mom was angry because of the intruder. How could they know that it was an attack from the other party? Rumbling. In the terrifying thundercloud, the thunder rolled and made a deafening sound. That terrifying aura was devastating, and even just a glance at it would make the heart tremble. The majesty that comes from nature is beyond the reach of mortals. Suddenly, the thunder in the thundercloud stopped, and under everyone's attention, a gap appeared in the center of the thundercloud. The knot. Is it over? A group of people breathed a sigh of relief, but immediately, a smear of blackness emerged from the gap. The huge thunderball was suspended above the cake island. Only then did people realize that it was not the thundercloud that dissipated on its own initiative, but that the thunderball shattered the surrounding thunderclouds. Booming Cake Island. Will my bounty increase to 1 billion? Anilu laughed wildly, and pulled down the thunderball fiercely. Tremble in front of Lei Ying. Mortals. Before God, kneel down. Ha 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 ha. Anilu has this kind of character. He can be said to be innocent or arrogant. He is the kind of person who will fly when he gets a little advantage, and he belongs to the blacklist that will never be called on the blacklist. Loya flipped Byakugan next to him and complained, the bounty of Chiwahai has been revoked, even if you kill the 4 emperors. And I said it was just to say hello. What do you mean? As if the pause button was pressed, Anilu turned his head and looked at Loya in confusion. Isn't that what you mean by greeting? Loya did not answer, because Charlotte Lingling had already answered him with practical actions. I saw that the clouds above the thunderball suddenly rioted, and the black thundercloud pythons rolled and jumped inside. If the thundercloud just now was just a kind of power of nature, then the current scene like a living creature is the real power that belongs to God. Suddenly, Anilu frowned and looked over there in disbelief. On the pitch-black thunderball, a lot of white light Madara suddenly appeared, and then gradually connected, turning into gaps. Under the watchful eyes of a group of people, the thunderball had not yet landed on the flag at the top of Cake Island, so it exploded in midair. Boom! A powerful current wandered in the air, and even Loya, who was in the distance, felt his skin numb. But that's it. The thunderball that dissipated in midair pushed the clouds away, allowing the sun to hit the Cake Island again. Except for the exclamations coming from the island, not even the pirate flag hanging at the top was damaged. Holding his hands, Loya blew a whistle, and didn't even look at Anilu, whose eyes were about to pop out. That's why I said, just say hello. Chapter 519 The 4 Stars Appear. Mom, what happened just now? Baron Eggy gasped in surprise, facing Lei Ying's destructive moves, even he couldn't be completely indifferent. However, just for a while, the sense of crisis suddenly disappeared, and there was no trace of it. Apart from the explanation that Charlotte Lingling shot, Baron Dandan didn't believe that Loya would take the initiative to stop. Humph. Just a little lightning strikes to sink my Cake Island, ignorant idiot. Charlotte Lingling called back Lei Yanzus and slowly stood up from her seat. Let's go outside. Sink. Cake Island. Baron Eggy swallowed hard, then quickly responded and followed the former out of the hall. Fire. Don't let them hit the beach. Under the command of a group of cadres, the chess soldiers quickly loaded the shells and fired them. The dense black iron balls blocked the sunlight, not to mention large targets such as ships. Even the little ice wolf knights would endure more than 3 shells. With a few sailboats alone, the artillery they carry naturally cannot be compared with the carefully arranged firepower of the opponent. Simon had already expected this situation, so the ice wolf cavalry appeared. One by one, the undead soldiers rode on the ice wolf, walking fast on the sea, flexibly avoiding the oncoming cannon rain. Even if a hapless person is hit, he can use the ice wolf under him as a surrogate for the dead. The shelling on the coast did not stop them from advancing. On the contrary, no matter how intensive the shelling was, the ice wolf cavalry always approached the coast in an orderly manner. For less than 1/10 of the price, they set foot on the soft sand. What followed was a joyous slaughter. Go! Kill them all! With the agile undead and the flexible ice wolf, the artillery troops on the coast were slaughtered, and they could not organize an effective counterattack. The undead army rampaged all the way, chopping melons and vegetables to clean up. When the cannon was misfired and a fish slipped through the net at will, Loya commanded the troops and issued the order to charge. The whole army marches forward, with the beach as a stronghold. Target, Charlotte Lingling. Yes. The sound of a sword colliding sounded, and the legion was ready to fight with high fighting spirit. Tony laughed bloodthirsty, and couldn't wait to run to the edge of the guardrail, and a fierce man got into the sea. When he reappeared, he was already standing by the beach in the distance. Watching him slash one by one, whether it was a cannon fodder soldier or a cadre of the frontline commander, they all turned into dead souls under the sword. Loya rubbed his temples with a headache, and had a bit of the appearance Sengoku had when facing him before. Don't kill all the capable ones, you still have a few left for experiments. Aldo, you go and tell him. Wait, Brother Jerome, you two go. Understand. Under Aldo's resentful gaze, the two Jerome brothers pulled out Zanyu and Izumi from their waists, and stepped on the moon to the coast. After they left, Aludo cried out in grievance. Loya. None of my business. You can't learn to walk on your own. With the artillery positions destroyed, the soldiers of the Wrath Legion had to engage in close combat with the undead. It was not obvious that only a few Ice Wolf cavalrymen rushed forward. They tried their best to still surround them in the crowd, but as the main force landed on the beach, the tide of battle was suddenly reversed. The wolf-like undead army easily stood firm on the coast, and easily tore its formation apart, revealing a wide road enough to pass two carriages. In the eyes of outsiders, this terrifying angry army, facing the army of the undead under Loya, is like dough, kneading as much as you want. The so-called cadres in the Charlotte family who seem to be unattainable can be hacked to death by random squad leaders who rush up to them. The Ice Wolf walked slowly on the road opened by the Legion. Sitting on the back of the Ice Wolf, Loya sucked the juice with interest, watching Tony over there being entangled by a middle-aged man with indigo hair and a fan. He had slaughtered as much as he wanted while surrounded by the angry Legion, and naturally he was the first to attract the attention of the other party's senior cadres. Loya has an impression of this person, named Charlotte Moscato, the ice cream minister of all nations, Totland. The first appearance in the original book was to stop the runaway Big Mom from destroying the town, but Charlotte Lingling, who suffered from eczema, did not recognize her 6 parents, and directly took away 40 years of his life. Judging from his human appearance, his 40-year lifespan is estimated to be cold. But now he is still alive, and he still has the spare time to stop Tony. Holding a strange knife in the shape of an ice cream cone, I fought with Tony. But didn't return. In the same period in the past, probably only Tony would practice so desperately. In his eyes, the former first place in the elite assessment was not only a glory, but a shame. In order to try to catch up with Loya's footsteps and prove himself, when he was still in the Navy, Tony was the hardest one. A lot of things happened later, including fusing the Titans, including studying with Shanks, all for the purpose of the past. There are many dreams of people. Tony's dream is not to pursue something, nor to crave something. He is just simple, and wants to stand at the height of Loya and overlook the world. Therefore, before Ulysses and Kay Rockdale did not appear, the current Tony was the strongest member of the Legion. Moscato is very strong. Otherwise he would not be a minister of the nations, but he is much worse than Tony. His eyes were fixed on Moscato's strange knife. Tony didn't fight with the opponent recklessly. With the power obtained from the fusion of the Titan, the Bone Coon made a slight mistake, and the vibration brought by the blade swayed it aside. At this moment, the doors of the two were wide open, and whoever pulled the body back first had the right to launch an attack first and seize the slightest chance. The slightest gap may not be seen by ordinary people, but in the duel between masters, it may be the slightest gap that is enough to determine the outcome of the next few rounds. Moscato also realized this. He stomped heavily with his left foot, stamping a footprint on the ground, and then pulled his body as hard as he could, trying to slash down with a backhand sword. But he just turned around, and what greeted him was Yuhi's dazzling sickle. The sharp breath penetrated into the bones, and he only felt a burst of pain. And then, scoff. The blood-colored sickle ruthlessly cut off Moscato from top to bottom, and there was no trace of adhesion at the incision, which was enough to see how sharp it was. Standing firm, Tony scattered the buds wrapped around the Bone Coon, looked at the corpse Mukuro under his feet, and smiled disdainfully. Ice cream minister. The son who was born can be a minister like this. It's not right, Charlotte. How much did Tai Lingling expect? Moscato. Suddenly, a shrill roar came from not far away. Almost subconsciously, He blocked Baegu-kun by his face. Ding. Tony flew out all of a sudden. Looking at the jelly bean that knocked Tony away, a serious look finally appeared on Loya's face. Katakuri. Is the four generals shot? Chapter 520 Charlotte Katakuri. The various ministers and officials of the Charlotte family did not appear on this court cake island in the past. They each have their own station, assisting Charlotte Lingling in commanding the nations. Because of the arrival of Loya, a rare feast appeared here. The four generals are all present. A tall and thin figure flashed over from a distance. He looked at Loya above the ice wolf with a grim expression, and then glanced at the corpse on the ground with a trembling glance. Moscato. Sorry, I'm late. Katakuri, among the sons and daughters of Charlotte Lingling, is still the strongest in the entire world. In addition to his solid foundation, the fruit ability of Nuo fruit has also been developed by him to an ultimate, and many years ago, he has stepped into the realm of ability awakening. And his observation haki is extremely powerful. Powerful enough to even see the future. It was through this ability that he, who was standing behind him, foresaw the scene of Moscato's death, and rushed to save people in a hurry. But I didn't expect that my speed was still a little slow. Just a little bit. You can change the ending of your younger brother and save him. After possessing the ability to see the future, this was the first time Katakuri felt powerless. Four generals, Katakuri. Right. Loya glanced at him condescendingly, then slowly said, "Are you interested in making a deal?" "No," Katakuri replied indifferently, and suddenly flicked his arm. Armament haki spread all over his hand instantly, and the arm began to rotate. It wasn't my brother who came back to life as the dead. And I won't betray my mother. Corner sticks. Snapped. There was a sudden explosion in the air, and Katakuri, who resolutely shot, did not dare to hold back, and Nuo Tuan's arm suddenly stretched and hit Loya's head. Tisk. Foreseeing the future. What an annoying ability. Sighing softly, Loya raised his hand, and a terrifying cold air spread from him. Icefall Funeral. Swish. Katakuri's attack came quickly, and when the air exploded, it was already close to Loya. However, Loya can activate magic faster than him, and he can still come first. An ice wall spread out from the waist of the ice wolf under the seat, blocking the constantly spinning horns. And this is not the end. The cold air spreads, and the surrounding of Katakuri suddenly turned into an ice field, and the rolled-up ice wrapped him in, and squeezed hard in the middle. Boom. Under the fierce collision, there is no gap in the ice. Even if it is an ant, it will be crushed into flesh. However, there was no expression on Loya's face, and he waved his hand to loosen the ice cube, revealing a pool of white sticky substance inside. Tony, watch your back. At this moment, Tony, who had just got up from the ground, only felt a murderous aura coming from behind, and his eyelids kept jumping. Hearing Loya's words, he didn't even think about it. A vicious dog rushed back to his back. Ding! The sharp trident, mole, drilled over Tony's head and stabbed Ice Wolf's back ankle. With just a click, the extremely hard ice was pierced through by the trident, turning into pieces of broken ice of different sizes, which fell all over the ground. Sensing the breath of the sneak attacker, Tony propped himself on the ground with his hands, holding the bone-kun in his backhand, spinning like a spinning top. His response was correct. Anticipating that the sneak attack would fail, Katakuri's empty hand had already wrapped around armament haki, and hit him directly in the back. When Tony started spinning, Katakuri's fist hit the sharp edge of the blade. The confrontation between armament haki collided with clusters of bright sparks. Seemingly aware of something again, Katakuri did not choose to continue the fight, got up and jumped away from the spot. So the ability to predict the future is very annoying, and I can't be lazy if I want to. Loya helplessly scattered the magic in his hand and shook his head. He was about to repeat the same trick just now, wrapping Katakuri with the funeral of an ice waterfall. After all, it was his real body that appeared this time, and there was really no way to survive if he was wrapped. But who would have thought that, with such a cooperative performance, he resisted the urge to do something to the glutinous avatar, trying to paralyze the opponent's judgment, and Katakuri even kept his hand. Unlike Loya's depression, Katakuri was only shocked at the moment. In the picture he saw just now, it was obvious that Roha should turn a blind eye to the battle between him and Tony, but he didn't expect that he would suddenly attack him. Loya thought that it was Katakuri who saw the future, so he chose to avoid it in advance, but only he knew that it was because he was not sure to break through Tony's blade, so he had to retreat. Why, I can't see his future. A drop of cold sweat dripped down Katakuri's forehead, and the horrible mouth under the scarf was dry. Everything that started obviously was running according to the picture he saw before. Why did everything else change when he revealed his real body and attacked? The observation Haki, who predicted the future, was the first to go wrong. This kind of situation has never happened to Charlotte Lingling. At this moment, Loya sensed 3 powerful auras rushing over from a distance, with a bit of teasing, and asked, I said that I only shot that fat woman, and there are dozens of families on the opposite side. Kadri, plus 4 generals, do you want to admit defeat? Don't do it, and I'm not fighting alone. Tony shook his head, broke his wrist, and repointed the tip of the knife at Katakuri. After a pause, he asked as if to himself, to die or to live? His fruit ability is rather special, half dead. Understood. The amount of information in this sentence is a bit large, and Katakuri's pupils suddenly tightened. What are you trying to do? I'll tell you if I win. Tony smiled bloodthirsty, and bloody Yuhi-colored granulation stretched out from his body, looking very disgusting. Those buds have no eyes, only a circular mouth at the tip, which is covered with finely pointed kiba, roaring viciously towards the surroundings. Holding the bone-kun backhand around his waist, tentacle monster, Tony breathed a sigh of relief. Asura Dao profound truth, 1 blade flow, 1000 corpse Buddha. Laugh. The terrifying murderous aura condensed the space, and the white bone-kun, grey-white sword carried a string of phantoms, which fell lightly on Katakuri. Puff. Katakuri tried hard to break free from this unknown bondage, but found that he couldn't move a finger, so he watched the sharp blade reach his body. Until the pain stimulates the brain, he will have the opportunity to avoid it. However, at this moment, Baigu-kun suddenly accelerated, leaving a deep bloodstain on his chest. The blood spilled on the ground, and the granulation on Tony's arm flew out fiercely, licking the blood on the tip of the knife and the ground greedily. Oh, is this Zhang Xing's blood? Tony grinned nervously, his eyes had turned a coquettish Yuhi color, his pupils shrunk a little, pitch black as ink. What's the matter, big man? Can't you see the future? Why don't you run away? The meaning of molesting in this sentence is self-evident. Katakuri used a glutinous ball to stick the wound to prevent the blood from continuing to seep. Why not hide? It's not that he doesn't want to hide, it's that he can't hide. What he predicted was that if he couldn't pull enough distance from Tony in an instant, then no matter where he was, this living slash would find him and hit him. Moreover, in the face of Tony's slash, the murderous aura that soared to the sky gave him the illusion of facing Charlotte Lingling. That kind of suppressing effect that goes straight to the heart, just like the soul fruit. In that state, let alone dodging, even the fingers were too frightened to move. Yes, it is fear. Katakuri is scared. Tony's slash is not strong enough, but the murderous aura condensed from his body is terrifying. Coupled with the moves he learned from Yuhifa, Shanks to condense and refine his own momentum, growing up to this day, this murderous aura is enough to shake the hearts of anyone in the world. That's not sword energy, it's just a pure, Yuhi fruity, most primitive, killing intent.